Chapter 1538. Needless to say, the people who saw this scene also knew that Yang Chen's wives and concubines in the sect would definitely receive the best care. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that they could have a direct relationship with Master Yang was enough to make all the major sect crazily support them. Yang Chen said it casually, it was just the filial piety of a junior to an elder. However, which fairy immortal expert present could accept this kind of filial piety with a clear conscience? His wives and concubines were originally the disciples of the sect. Even if they took care of them, it would just be the icing on the cake. Elder Lu had said that she would not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. If the three of them simply took care of Yang Chen's wives and concubines, who were also disciples of the sect, it would make people laugh their teeth off. As fairy immortal elders, how could they do such a tasteless thing? Therefore, the three fairy immortal elders also took turns to express that if Yang Chen had any difficulties, he could come to them and they would never refuse. In the face of the four fairy immortal experts who extended a stick to him, Yang Chen almost did not hesitate to immediately answer, "This junior has a difficult matter, and I want to ask the seniors to help me coordinate. Please take care of me." The four of them were stunned. Although they had planned to repay Yang Chen, they did not expect that Yang Chen's request would come so quickly. But this was also good. 6 months of debt could be paid quickly. As long as it was paid, it was not bad to be debt-free. The four of them nodded one after another. The others also wanted to hear what Yang Chen's request was, and also wanted to have one more reference when they asked for elixirs in the future. Unfortunately, Yang Chen did not give them this opportunity. Some things could only be said to the parties involved, but it was not convenient to make it public. Several fairy immortal experts and Yang Chen entered the back hall of Chunyang Palace together to discuss, and the rest of the people could only watch them leave. They were very reluctant, but there was nothing they could do. Speaking of which, the people who came to Chunyang Palace this time had basically achieved their goals. They found Chunyang Palace, met Yang Chen, and saw the prolongation elixir. More importantly, Elder Lu personally tested the elixir and confirmed its efficacy. If a fifth-grade alchemist was not worth mentioning in the spiritual world, then Yang Chen, a fifth-grade alchemist, was definitely an exception. How many Tier 7 pill masters could only look at Yang Chen's prolonging life pill and drool, but they simply did not know how to refine it. The news spread like wildfire as everyone left. Yang Chen's life-prolonging pill was really effective. Elder Lu of the Five Elements sect, who was a 10th tier heaven immortal, only took a few days to recover from an old man's appearance to that of a middle-aged man. It seemed like her cultivation base and state of mind had also improved. There was no more convincing example than this. If anyone didn't believe it, they could go and confront Elder Lu of the Five Elements sect. The legend of Yang Chen in the mortal world also began to slowly spread in the spiritual world. For some of the elixirs that Yang Chen refined in the mortal world, including Inner Sensing Pill, Heaven Seizing Pill, Questioning Inner Heart Pill, and Spirit Congealing Pill, these alchemy masters in the spiritual world were not rare. And comparing the pill recipes obtained with each other, Yang Chen's pill recipes were no different from the pill recipes mastered by other people in the spiritual world. Since some pill recipes could not be refined by other sect, it meant that they were the medicinal pills of the spiritual world. Others dare not say, the Questioning Inner Heart Pill and the Spirit Congealing Pill were definitely used by people in the spiritual world. Although it was not known what method Yang Chen used to get the pill recipes of the spiritual world, at least in these pill recipes, Yang Chen did not have any unique creativity. It was the 100-year pill and prolonging life pill that made people's eyes shine. Although the main materials of the two kinds of medicinal pills seemed to be generally the same, they were all demonic beads produced on the demon continent, but the grades were different, but the effects were different. Relatively speaking, the 100-year pill was a bit of a chicken rib, and the prolonging life pill was amazing. No one has ever thought about refining this kind of medicinal pill to increase one's lifespan with the level of a 5th-grade alchemy master. Let alone a 5th-grade alchemy master, even a 7th-grade alchemy master did not have such an extravagant hope. The prolonging life pill alone was enough to make Yang Chen famous in the history of alchemy in the cultivation world. In the future, as long as someone talked about the prolonging life pill, it would inevitably be associated with Yang Chen. This was the real glory. Countless people were curious about the contents of Yang Chen's invitation to the 4 fairy immortal masters to the back hall to discuss. In fact, when they didn't know, even Elder Lu and the others were very curious. Grandmaster Yang, if you have anything to say, just tell us. Elder Lu was very straightforward. She would never go back on her words easily. After sitting down, she immediately went straight to the subject. The other 3 fairy immortal masters also had the intention to die early, so they echoed Elder Lu's words and asked Yang Chen. Seniors, you must have noticed that this is the original mountain gate of Chimen sect. Yang Chen did not keep them in suspense and said directly, although this place is enough for my Chunyang palace, this junior does not want to build a mountain gate here. Therefore, this junior would like to ask the seniors to help this junior buy a piece of land from a few big sect to build a mountain gate. As soon as they heard that it was a matter of coordinating the land, the 4 fairy immortal masters were slightly relieved. Although it was not a small matter, it was actually not that difficult. Speaking of which, as long as Yang Chen did not want to occupy the foundation of other sects, it would not be a problem for him to find a place to stay. Moreover, listening to Yang Chen's tone, he did not want to occupy the land for free, but planned to buy it from a few big sects. With the prolonging life pill as a prelude, they believed that it would not be too difficult for Yang Chen to buy the land. If this was the only way to repay this big favor, the several fairy immortal masters would be happy to see it. Where do you want the land? This old man does not dare to boast, but I still have some faith. As long as it is not too excessive, there should be no problem. When Elder Lu heard this, he immediately patted his chest and promised, if there is really someone who does not have eyes, this old man does not mind letting him know how powerful I am. A fairy immortal master was indeed a fairy immortal master. This posture clearly showed that he wanted to take it by force. Anyway, as long as it was not his own sect's territory, it was not difficult to take it from others. Was there a lack of such things in the spiritual world? Not to mention anything else, it could be seen just from the fact that Chunyang Palace now occupied the territory of Chimen sect. As long as it was done cleanly, and the sect took care of it, no one would dare to look for trouble. The 5 Elements sect plus the Qiankuan sect, the Green Jade Immortal Island, and the Blue Cloud sect, if the 4 sects joined forces, even the Xiantian sect would have to give them some face. Elder Lu made such a statement, and the other 3 fairy immortal masters also did the same. Their own sect could not let the 5 Elements sect monopolize the beauty. It was not a bad thing to have a good relationship with Yang Chen, so naturally they strongly supported it. There is no need for the seniors to go through so much trouble. Yang Chen had a smile on his face, as if he had already seen the land he wanted fall into his hands. Chunyang Palace is still a little rich, and I am willing to pay a lot of money. I will never make it difficult for the seniors. Chapter 1539. After hearing the territory mentioned by Yang Chen, the 4 fairy immortal elders looked at each other and were speechless for a while. It was not that Yang Chen's request was so outrageous that they couldn't do it at all, but that Yang Chen's request was too low. They were senior experts, so it was really inexcusable for them to repay the favor so easily. The place that Yang Chen wanted was not an important place of any sect, nor was it a prosperous place. On the contrary, the place that Yang Chen asked for was basically a piece of land in the wilderness that many sects didn't want. Strictly speaking, that place was a piece of land without an owner at all. It was barren, and there was no obvious spiritual vein around it. No sect was willing to build a mountain gate there. When Yang Chen said that he wanted to buy it, it was a bit of an exaggeration. As long as Chunyang Palace occupied it and built a mountain gate, no one would point fingers at them and compete with them for the territory. It seemed a bit childish for the 4 fairy immortals to come forward and coordinate such a place. If Yang Chen didn't deliberately make fun of the 4 fairy immortals, it could only be said that Yang Chen used such an excuse to let the 4 of them not bear the favor of Yang Chen and Chunyang Palace. That was all. The 4 of them were also from the famous righteous sections. No matter what, they also had the pride of fairy immortals. How could they accept Yang Chen's kindness so easily? Even if it was to take care of Yang Chen's wives and concubines in the sect in the future, it was also their duty. They couldn't renege on the favor so easily. Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, and Hatred Parting Sea. Are you sure you want this large area? Elder Lu couldn't believe it and specially asked for confirmation. Yes, Senior. Yang Chen replied with certainty, and then repeated, Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, and Hatred Parting Sea. Elder Lu's brows furrowed as she racked her brains to recall the information about these 3 places. The other 3 Heaven Immortal experts were also puzzled, and they tried to guess what Yang Chen's intention was. If he wanted to use this to let the 4 fairy immortals get off the stage with dignity and not owe the Chunyang Palace and Yang Chen a favor, it was a reasonable reason. But Yang Chen did not need to choose these 3 places. After all, Yang Chen himself said that he wanted these places to build the gate of Chunyang Palace. What was the point of having these 3 places without spiritual power? Speaking of which, it couldn't be said that there were no spiritual veins or spiritual power there at all. The territory of the resentful parting sea was not small, and it was not strange at all that there were a few large spiritual veins in the sea. However, it was inevitable that there would be some ferocious beasts in the sea that occupied the best spiritual veins. Yang Chen and the others were just a few cat. How could they gain a foothold in the sea of parting hatred? In addition to the Sea of Parting Hatred, the Linyang River and the Sunset Rock were adjacent to the Sea of Parting Hatred, and the 2 were even connected. The 3 places added up had a radius of 100,000 miles. The place was definitely not small, but the land there was barren and inaccessible. There were not even many aborigines in the spiritual realm, let alone any cultivators. Only those who were chaste and had nowhere to go would occasionally escape to that place. It was really not suitable to build a gate there. Master Yang, it's not that we are unreasonable, but the place you chose is not suitable to build a gate. Elder Lu was not willing to be criticized by others, so he had to persuade him. Master, you've just arrived in the spiritual realm, so it's normal that you don't know the geographical distribution. Why don't we throw away our pride and find a suitable territory for you from a few sects? This was Elder Lu's kindness. It could be said that she was extremely benevolent to say such words. If Yang Chen knew what was good for him, he should immediately comply and express his gratitude. Elder Lu and the others would definitely do their best to do this for Yang Chen, and everyone would be happy. Thank you, Senior. I also have my reasons. Please take care of me. Yang Chen was not a person who didn't know what was good or bad. He hurriedly thanked them, but still insisted on his own choice. If the seniors are really sorry, this younger generation junior still has a presumptuous request. I also ask the seniors to come forward, in the name of the senior sect, to admit that this place belongs to the pure Yang Palace. This is enough. If Xiantian sect can also come forward and admit it, it will be the most perfect. In fact, after going around in circles, the last point was Yang Chen's real purpose. What Yang Chen wanted was the recognition of several major sects. As long as the 4 major sects publicly recognized that this was the territory of Chunyang Palace, then there would be no more blind guys coming to seize it. As long as Yang Chen used the prolonging life pill and a few favors, he could firmly control this territory in the hands of Chunyang Palace. Of course, if Xiantian sect also publicly admitted it, it would be better. As a person with the memory of his previous life, No one knew better than Yang Chen how much benefit it would bring to Chunyang Palace in the future after occupying this territory. However, Elder Lu and the other three misunderstood him. Or rather, they only understood a small part of him. Yang Chen had said it like this. Of course, the four of them would not refuse again, and they did not intend to change Yang Chen's mind. In the minds of the four fairy immortal masters, since Yang Chen could have the questioning inner heart pill and spirit congealing pill of the spiritual world in the mortal world, he must have received some guidance from the spiritual world from a certain channel. In this way, maybe there was one or several super-spiritual veins that had not been discovered in the Sunset Rock, Linyang River, and Parting Hatred Sea. No one knew where Yang Chen got the specific news, so he strongly requested that the sect be built there. If this was the case, it was a safe way for Chunyang Palace to choose such a remote location. Chunyang Palace had no foundation in the spiritual world. Even if it occupied the territory of Chiman's sect now, it was estimated that it would be very difficult to defend it. It was better to give up voluntarily, and then start from scratch in a place that others disdained to fight for. At that time, as long as there were a few supermasters to help them protect the remote territory of Chunyang Palace would not have any interest disputes with other sects in the short term, who would deliberately find trouble and take the risk of offending the masters to lower themselves to the level of a small sect. In that case, we won't be long-winded. After understanding Yang Chen's thoughts, Elder Lu considered it from Yang Chen's perspective and finally nodded. This matter, we will definitely do it well for you. It is not impossible for Xiantian's sect to come forward and admit it. Several fairy immortal masters had the same idea. With such a simple condition, if they did not do it perfectly, they would lose their faces. In any case, they had to let Xiantian's sect come forward and admit this matter. Seeing several fairy immortal masters nod, Yang Chen's heart finally fell to the ground. That piece of feng shui treasure land would belong to Chunyang Palace in the future. Chapter 1540. The four fairy immortal masters spared no effort to run for the site of Chunyang Palace with an apologetic mood. Yang Chen and the elders of Chunyang Palace had already begun to pack up the good things on the site of Chiman's sect and planned to move. Chiman's sect was backed by the Profound Heaven sect. Although it was not valued by the big shots, young Master Yi Xian was also a well-known figure in the sect. Otherwise, he would not dare to play with Tao Junkie. With the help of young Master Yi Xian, the site of Chiman's sect was not good, but it was by no means bad. If with the previous scale of Chunyang Palace, to be able to get such a piece of land in the spiritual world, it was definitely a great fortune for the ancestors to show their spirit and burn incense. But now with Yang Chen, everything was completely different. Such a small site with a radius of thousands of miles, not to mention Yang Chen, even the head of the palace did not put it in his eyes. With the Chunyang Palace of the Demon Continent in the mortal world, the former Meiqing Mountain felt shabby. Even if the territory of Chiman's sect was more than 10 times larger than Meiqing Mountain, it could not meet the wishes of the head of the palace. The three places chosen by Yang Chen, the Sunset Rock, Linyangchuan and the Hatred Sea, the head of the palace and the elders had never heard of them. However, this did not hinder the elders' trust in Yang Chen. As for where Yang Chen got the news and knew about these sites, it was even more irrelevant. Where is it more suitable? Among the many elders, only the master ancestor Wang Yong and a few other fairy immortal masters asked after they left. It was not a doubtful tone, it was just a confirmation. It is more suitable over there. Yang Chen nodded heavily and gave the master ancestor a very positive answer. At this point, no one said anything more. Everyone was in the same mind to plunder the site and prepare to leave. Compared with the fact that Chunyang Palace wanted to use the site of Chiman's sect in exchange for the Sunset Rock, Linyangchuan and the Hatred Sea, what was more shocking was that Chunyang Palace only used a dozen people to destroy the Chiman's sect with the 6th grade of the Earth Immortal. People who knew the details of Chunyang Palace were very clear. In Chunyang Palace, there were only a few people who had ascended for thousands of years. The strongest were estimated to be the Herculean ape king Ho Yun and the old tree demon. Gao Yu Gong's Sunling was also one of them. These people had the same characteristic. That was, when they were in the mortal world, they could kill the human immortal masters who had not passed the tribulation. In particular, Gao Yu Gong's Sunling participated in the war of strangling the second grade of the earth immortal beast of the demon continent. It could be said that her combat effectiveness was absolutely strong. However, even so, in a higher place, even if the few of them together could fight against the fourth grade of the Earth Immortal Master, it was impossible for them to be the opponents of the 6th grade of the Earth Immortal Masters of Chimen Sect. This was not counting the dozens of Earth Immortal Masters of Chimen Sect. This battle simply made countless people unable to understand how Chunyang Palace won. Fortunately, when Chunyang Palace fought with Chimen Sect, the movement was too big. Not to mention anything else, just the size of Long Xian after he appeared could not escape the attention of many people. Long Xian's distinctive body shape, combined with the news of the Zhao family from the mortal world, it was not difficult for people to guess the identity of Long Xian. In this way, things were much more reasonable. At that time, the Zhao family manor had been located on the huge back of the fourth grade of the Earth Immortal Black Tortoise, and its whereabouts were uncertain. Later, with the help of Yang Chen's family, Black Tortoise broke the demonic formation and killed the Zhao family. After that, he crossed the tribulation and ascended. This time, it was not surprising that he helped Yang Chen to destroy Chimen Sect. Originally, Black Tortoise was a fourth grade of the Earth Immortal in the mortal world. After crossing the tribulation, his strength was greatly increased. After hundreds of years, it was not impossible for his cultivation to grow more than 6th grade of the Earth Immortal. Moreover, Black Tortoise itself was an ancient species, so it was normal for its combat effectiveness to be strong. With this explanation, the people who doubted it were slowly relieved. The people of the big sect were fine. They did not think it was a big deal. It was just a small Chimen sect being destroyed. It was not worth making a fuss. Some people of the small sect were a little jealous. Why did Chunyang Palace have the support of an Earth Immortal Master as soon as they came up, but after they ascended, they almost had to go through hardships and hardships all the way? People could not be compared with each other. As soon as they compared, they would find a huge gap. This was also the reason why it was so frustrating to compare. The only thing that made people feel psychologically balanced was that Chunyang Palace probably knew their own affairs. They knew that it was impossible to occupy the current territory of Chimen Sect by relying on a Black Tortoise. Therefore, they were very clever to persuade 4 fairy immortal masters with 4 prolongation elixirs and seek a broken place in the wilderness to be the mountain gate of the sect. It was very strange that when no one paid attention to the Sunset Rock, Linyang River and the resentful parting sea, few people would pass through this place in 100 years. It was a barren land with no spiritual veins and no resources. If it was forced to say that there were some places suitable for cultivation in the resentful parting sea, but they had to compete with some fierce sea beasts in the sea. The loss outweighed the gain. In such a place, no one would be curious enough to come and check it in person. But now that they heard that Chunyang Palace wanted this place, some people couldn't help but be curious. They quickly ran over there and searched around to see if this place was a feng shui treasure land at all. Otherwise, how could Master Yang Chen, who had always been famous for taking advantage of others and not suffering losses, take a fancy to such a rotten land where birds did not lay eggs? Especially the dozens of sect that had expanded the territory of the demon continent with Chunyang Palace were not neglectful. They immediately sent the most capable people to explore quickly. The scene of Yang Chen turning a demon continent into a blessed land for cultivation was still vivid in their minds. How could such a big advantage be easily taken away by Yang Chen? The Sunset Rock and Linyang River were actually at the junction of the 2 sects. The two sides each occupied one half. The first to arrive was also the closest to them. When they arrived at the place, everyone didn't say a word, and began to dig 3 feet into the ground to search. Everyone wanted to know what was here that was worthy of Master Yang Chen, using 4 grade 4 prolonging life pills as the price, just to ask 4 fairy immortal masters to come forward? After a search, this huge place was really not simple. At least hundreds of ordinary spiritual veins were found. After all, it was a huge area of 100,000 miles. If there was really nothing, it would be too fake. However, these hundreds of spiritual veins were nothing in the eyes of these big sections. The spiritual veins were very ordinary. At best, it was enough for a few earth immortals and human immortals to cultivate alone. It was absolutely impossible to support the entire sect. Some mineral resources were also found, but the variety was very common, and it could be found almost everywhere. The appearance was also very ordinary, and there was nothing to tempt the big sect at all. Chapter 1541. In this way, this place was definitely a good place for a small sect, especially a small sect like Chunyang Palace, which had no foundation in the spiritual world and started from scratch. The resources were not too much, but it was enough, and it would not cause disputes because it was too rich. From this point of view, Chunyang Palace was estimated to have this idea. According to reason, in such a place, 4 fairy immortals, and they were the fairy immortals of the 4 major sects of Tao sects, how could the other sects give them some face? In particular, Chunyang Palace would not ask for it in vain, but they would exchange it with the current territory of Chiman sect plus other appropriate compensation. There should be no problem with this condition to take over a barren land. But the problem was here. No one believed that Yang Chen would use such good conditions to exchange for such a large piece of land. Therefore, even if the 4 fairy immortals came forward, the 2 sect of the territory did not immediately agree. In addition to sending people to explore crazily, the rest was to keep probing. Obviously, they could not get any news from the mouth of the 4 fairy immortals, so the 2 major sect turned their attention to the other masters of Chunyang Palace. Before the head of the palace and the others ascended, they also had many friends in the cultivation world. Soon, someone came to the door and inquired about the real purpose of them wanting that piece of land. They could only blame Yang Chen's reputation in the mortal world that had never suffered a loss was too great, so no one dared to believe that Yang Chen would get a large piece of land as soon as he ascended without any benefits. If there were no huge benefits in it, then it would be strange. Of course, from the elders of Chunyang Palace, those people could not get any news and returned in frustration. The secret of that piece of land, even Gao Yugong's Sunling, the closest person to Yang Chen, did not know, let alone others. This was done deliberately by Yang Chen. From the beginning, Yang Chen knew that it was not easy to get a piece of territory, so no one knew the secret except for him. After a few rounds of probing, those people could not get any useful information from Chunyang Palace, so they gave up and stopped asking. Come to think of it, if he knew such a secret, he wouldn't say it either. He would definitely use all sorts of methods to obtain it. Unfortunately, Yang Chen was still too inexperienced and had exposed his target early on. Now, even if those people dug 3 feet deep into the ground, they could not find any attractive targets on the Sunset Rock and Linyang River. However, the sect that owned the 2 pieces of land was unwilling to transfer them. No matter how hard the 4 celestial immortals tried to persuade them, they could not achieve their goal. They would even rather offend the 4 celestial immortals and the 4 celestial immortals. The 4 heaven immortal experts probably never thought that they would be rejected even though they were only responsible for facilitating this transaction. Speaking of this, it also made them feel ashamed. The 2 sect really did not know how to appreciate favors. The other party probably knew that they would definitely offend the celestial immortals by doing this, so their attitude was very proper. Except for refusing to sell the land, they were very polite to the 4 elders. They could not find a suitable reason to fall out with them immediately. As for the 4 sect behind them, the 2 sects sent a lot of filial piety, hoping that the 4 sect would not exert too much pressure on them. The reason they put out was also reasonable. This was the territory passed down by the ancestors, and the unfilial descendants of the later generations would not dare to squander in any case. Everyone knew that this was an excuse, but they could not do anything about it. If the 4 celestial immortals did not want to fight, they could only lose face. If it was only these 2 sect, the 4 celestial immortals would definitely be able to suppress them. However, the 4 sect themselves were also guessing what secrets there were on the Sunfall Rock and Linyang River. Yang Chen's wives and concubines had just arrived at the sect and belonged to the lowest generation of disciples. Even if they were doted on by the elders of the sect, they did not have that kind of influence. They could only be anxious and could not help. The internal and external pressure made the 4 celestial immortals have to admit that they could not complete the task that Yang Chen had entrusted to them for the time being. However, they had already received Yang Chen's prolongation pill and had taken it. This was a great favor that was almost comparable to the grace of saving their lives. They had no choice but to bite the bullet and rush to Chunyang Palace again to see if they could discuss with Yang Chen to change the conditions. When they met this time, the 4 celestial immortals no longer had the spirit of looking down on the world. In front of Yang Chen, they all looked a little dejected. Elder Wang, who had the highest cultivation, bit the bullet and told the whole story. His face was flushed, and he hesitantly hoped that Yang Chen would change one of the conditions. Hey, it's not a big deal. Yang Chen did not feel dejected because he could not get the territory as everyone imagined. He just laughed and said, "Since those places are not good, let's change to another one. Senior, what do you think of Yanluo Mountain?" The 4 were stunned. Changing the place so easily? Yanluo Mountain was also a wilderness, but it was better than the Sunfall Rock and Linyang River. At least people already knew that there were several large spiritual veins there, and several rogue cultivators occupied it. It seemed that they had also built a cave residence. The size of the territory was about the same, enough for Chunyang Palace to develop peacefully. However, speaking of Yanluo Mountain, it was the same as the 3 pieces of land that Yang Chen wanted before. Basically, they were all places that the big sect did not care about or places that they did not care about in the past. Compared to the previous places, Yanluo Mountain was even more convenient. There were no big sect forces there, only some rogue cultivators. If it was occupied, it would be more convenient for the 4 celestial immortals. I heard that there are some rogue cultivators occupying Yanluo Mountain. If it's convenient, Senior, please help me clean up the territory of the sect. Yang Chen smiled and said the conditions. Anyway, it was a fixed point. The territory of his sect needed the help of the 4 celestial immortals. This time, the 4 celestial immortals did not immediately pat their chest. The last time they were slapped in the face was not completely over. This time, Yang Chen picked another territory. It was impossible that there was no secret in it. They all had the same thought in their minds. This was the right way. Only a fool would reveal their main goal at the beginning. Needless to say, the previous Sunfall Rock, Linyang River, and Hatred Parting Sea were clearly thrown out by Yang Chen to attract everyone's attention. The real goal was definitely not those 3 places, but the later goal. Yanluo Mountain might be it, but it might not be. If it could not be done this time, maybe Yang Chen could mention another place. Everyone was clear about this move. It was just a diversion. It was ridiculous that the 2 sect had shaved off a layer of the face of the 4 celestial immortals for a useless bait. Chapter 1542. No matter which place I buy, I only have one request. That is, the territory of Chunyang Palace in the future must be recognized by several major sects. Yang Chen added his request very seriously. Even if Chunyang Palace can't defend itself, when future generations come to take it back, the whole world must understand that this is my Chunyang Palace taking back its own territory. When Yang Chen said his request, The four fairy immortal masters listened very carefully. In front of Master Yang, who had given them almost all of their remaining lives, no one would put on the posture of a fairy immortal master. Sure enough, it's Grandmaster Yang. He has a long-term vision. He is better than those who are short-sighted and only see what's in front of them. When Yang Chen finished speaking, the four masters had already understood Yang Chen's meaning. One of them immediately praised, "If the people of Chiman's sect had half of Master Yang's knowledge, they would not have to rely on the Xiantian sect to protect such a treasure land." No matter where it was, the territory of a powerful sect was fixed. First, no one dared to have any ideas about them. Second, no one could have any ideas about them. Everyone was fighting for those small sects. Today you take down my territory, and tomorrow I will take down your territory. One of the important reasons was that the territory occupied by the small sect was not recognized. To put it bluntly, the territory occupied by these sects was not recognized by those big sects. The consequence of not being recognized was that whoever had the bigger fist would occupy the territory. As long as the interests of those big sects were not violated, they would not covet these territories. Even if the pure Yang Palace now relied on the destruction of the Chi-Men sect to get the site of the Chi-Men sect and became the de facto owner of the site, as long as they had the ability to occupy it, the site would always belong to the pure Yang Palace. However, once a more powerful sect took action, the territory would immediately change hands, and no one would complain for Chunyang Palace. It was not safe to only get the recognition of one sect. Chiman sect was obviously recognized by Xiantian sect, but Chunyang Palace had destroyed Chiman sect. At least until now, no one had jumped out to say anything. In the end, it was still a publicly acknowledged problem that had to be accepted by the majority. Once it became a territory recognized by most of the big sect, no one would dare to do anything to it. As Yang Chen said, even if some powerful enemies occupied it, when the descendants of Chunyang Palace came to fight for it, it would be called taking back the ancestral property. No one would have any objection to this. Others might not know, but Yang Chen knew very well that having such a righteous title and not having it were two completely different things. The four celestial immortals understood the same thing. They came from a big sect and did not have to consider this kind of problem, but this did not prevent them from understanding the key. Therefore, when Yang Chen mentioned the request of Sunset Cliff and Lin Yangchuan, they knew that they could generally return the favor to Yang Chen by doing this. Now that Yang Chen still insisted on this statement, it was obvious that it was not a sudden idea. The four celestial immortals knew in their hearts, so they did not refuse again. Since Yang Chen's real goal was Yanluo Mountain, they would have to work hard again. This junior will not make it difficult for you seniors. The land with a radius of 100,000 miles, including the population in the land, will be given 10 5-cycle life-prolonging pills. This time, Yang Chen clearly stated the price in his heart, so that the four celestial immortals could have a clear idea when they went out to negotiate. This is the bottom line of this junior. If you can negotiate a lower price, I don't mind giving you more benefits. 5-cycle life-prolonging pill? The eyes of the four celestial immortals tightened. One must know that the four of them only obtained one 4-cycle life-prolonging pill each. According to their own estimates, extending their lifespans by a few hundred years was not a problem at all. If the 4-cycle life-prolonging pill had such an effect, then how miraculous would the 5-cycle life-prolonging pill be? Extending lifespans by 1,000 years? Fortunately, they were all celestial immortals, so their minds were incomparably firm, so they did not lose their composure on the spot. However, the four celestial immortals already had other thoughts in their mind. Yang Chen's words were so clear that even an idiot could understand it. He offered 10 5-cycle life-prolonging pills, but the exact amount needed would depend on the abilities of the four celestial immortals. The lower the price, the more they would save. Yang Chen would not take back the leftovers, but the four celestial immortals themselves. This way, if something similar happened again, the 4 celestial immortals might have to fight to the death for the 5 cycle life-prolonging pills. Even if this matter was given to their own sect, it would not be a problem. Who would object? Who would complain that their life was too long? What if we can take down the Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, and Parting Hatred Sea that you mentioned earlier? Qiankuan sect's elder Lu suddenly thought of something and asked, if Yanluo Mountain were to fight, it would implicate a lot of people. Elder Lu was also taking precautions. As long as outsiders knew that Yang Chen wanted the news of Yanluo Mountain, it could be said that something similar to the Sunset Rock Linyang River would happen again. Just as Elder Lu said, Yanluo Mountain had a lot of implications, and they had to negotiate with several sects. It was much more complicated than the Sunset Cliff and Linyang River. Originally, it was just a casual question. Elder Lu did not expect Yang Chen to really want the Sunset Rock and Linyangchuan. However, he did not expect that when Yang Chen heard this question, he began to ponder. The 4 of them were surprised. Could it be that Yang Chen did not really want Yanluo Mountain? I just want to fight for a peaceful mountain for the sect. It does not have to be Yanluo Mountain. After pondering for a while, Yang Chen finally said his considerations. If Yanluo Mountain is not possible, then Chessboard Mountain, Frost Ice Plains, or Demon Buster Valley will do. Sunset Cliff and Linyang River are also not a problem. I just want a stable territory and the recognition of all the big sects. That is all. They originally thought that Yang Chen was pondering because he still had a real destination. However, when Yang Chen really mentioned these places, the 4 Heaven Immortal experts could not help but be a little stunned. The places that Yang Chen mentioned were all at the periphery. Although they were all occupied by the sect, these places were not suitable for the big sect to set up camp in. On the contrary, the difficulty of obtaining each place was getting higher and higher. These places were also getting more and more abundant in resources and more suitable for cultivation. If one thought about it in simple terms, it could be said that Yang Chen was really just as he said. He just wanted a quiet place to develop. However, if Yang Chen's request was so simple, then it would be too high for these barren lands. 5 revolutions life-prolonging pills. It was estimated that it would not be a big problem to take the lives of several fairy immortal masters. There would definitely be people who would be willing to take action for these prolonging life pills. Chapter 1543. With so many places, it was definitely not easy to check all of them to see if there were any hidden resources. Everyone thought of one thing, that was, what Yang Chen really wanted must be a piece of land hidden among them. As for what was in that piece of land, no one knew. The only thing everyone could do was to choose one of so many sites to sell to Chunyang Palace. Since Yang Chen could take out 10 5-cycle life-prolonging pills, there would definitely be enough masters to help Yang Chen do this, and there would definitely be a sect that would be willing to let go of a piece of land that they didn't know what was in it. Now, the people who knew the situation were betting on which piece Yang Chen wanted. What he wants, we must not give it to him. Although Chunyang Palace was just a small sect with more than a dozen people, and Xiantian sect could destroy it at any time if they wanted to, the matter of the Heaven and Earth Everlasting Original Suppression Formation had not been resolved. Even the most powerful sect did not dare to make a move at this juncture without any reason. The Taishaman's demise had only been a few hundred years ago. One of the reasons was that they were jointly destroyed because they provoked public anger. No matter how powerful Xiantian sect was, it had not reached the point of covering the sky with one hand. They still had to consider the reactions of other sects. At this time, they did not dare to make a move easily. To put it bluntly, Chiman sect was just an insignificant peripheral force of Xiantian sect. There were many such small sects around Xiantian sect, and it did not matter if they were destroyed. Moreover, young Master Ishian had already died. Before the matter of the Heaven and Earth Everlasting Original Suppression Formation was completely resolved, everything would be recorded first and settled in the future. Yang Chen's request was that it would be best for Xiantian sect to recognize a piece of land. The 4 fairy immortal masters from the 4 major sect previously said that it was because of their face, but now that there was a real 5-cycle life-prolonging pill, they did not hesitate to mobilize the resources of the sect to complete this matter for Chunyang Palace. Now that the 4 major sects had come forward, the mysterious Heaven sect would have to agree to this matter no matter what. However, although Xiantian sect nodded, they could not really let Chunyang Palace get the piece of land they wanted. Speaking of which, the territories that Yang Chen had proposed were really not too much. They were all on the periphery. However, Yang Chen had only ascended for a short period of time, and he had not come into contact with many people in the spiritual world. How did he know about the geographical distribution of the spiritual world? The poor Yang Lan and Yang Lan were once again put forward for interrogation. After suffering, the 2 of them had the heart to die. What was most unbearable was that up until now, neither of them knew why the sect had treated them this way. Previously, when Yang Chen was rejected for the Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, Hatred Parting Sea, there was the shadow of the profound Heaven sect behind it. Even if they could not directly deal with a few juniors, they could secretly give orders. How many sect dared to not give them face? Originally, they thought that this would force Chunyang Palace to be trapped in Chimen sect's territory and monitored from afar by the profound Heaven sect. However, Yang Chen did not care at all and immediately proposed Yanluo Mountain. Suddenly, Yanluo Mountain also became a place for people with intentions. This was not all. The people from the 4 major sects even began to appear in Chessboard Mountain, Ice Plains, and Demon Buster Valley. It seemed that they all wanted to know what was worth Yang Chen seeking. The 2 sect masters of the sect who had first rejected Yang Chen were now regretting their decision. If they had known that Yang Chen would use the 5-turn life-prolonging elixir to exchange for the Sunset Cliff and Linyang River, how could they not have agreed? A barren land in exchange for an expert's lifespan of a few thousand years or the lives of a few experts to be extended. Was there any more profitable business in the world than this? However, for the sake of a small figure in the profound Heaven sect, they let go of such benefits without getting anything. No one would feel comfortable. If this was really the intention of a big figure in the profound Heaven sect, and they would remember this favor, then it would be fine. However, it was just a human immortal disciple of the profound Heaven sect. Because of this, people felt that the gains did not make up for the losses. In the blink of an eye, more than half a year had passed. The places that Yang Chen mentioned had been turned upside down by many people, but they did not find anything that was worth their attention. On the contrary, Chunyang Palace sat on the fishing platform, quietly waiting for the news to come. No one disturbed them on weekdays, and it was very quiet. The territory of Chimen's sect was not bad, and many people were tempted. However, with the example of the destruction of Chimen's sect, everyone knew that Chunyang Palace was not so easy to provoke. Especially now that the effect of the prolongation elixir had been confirmed, Yang Chen could use the prolongation elixir to invite Heaven immortal experts at any time, who would jump out to seek death when they had a long life. Moreover, the intention of Chunyang Palace now was obviously to find a remote and quiet place to develop quietly. This kind of approach, which was not a threat to others and themselves, was naturally very reassuring. It was just a sect with more than a dozen people. So what if they were given a piece of land? Without tens of thousands of years of development, even a decent sect could not be supported. Since Chunyang Palace would definitely leave, why not wait a few more days for the people who wanted this piece of land? How could it be better to wait quietly for a few days to get a piece of land that could be easily obtained after killing people and making enemies? This time, the 4 Heaven immortal experts put on a very tough stance. They gathered the relevant forces of Yanluo Mountain, Chessboard Mountain, Ice Plain, and Demon Buster Valley together. With the power of the sect, they put out a price of 5 revolution prolongation elixirs and let them negotiate directly. Whoever was willing to take the prolongation elixir would hand over the territory. At this point, there had to be a conclusion. Otherwise, the four great heavenly immortal experts would lose face, but the four great sects would lose face, which would be a big deal. The four experts worked hard, and even the Xiantian sect was involved. However, it did not directly involve their territory. They were just waiting for a conclusion. There were too many monks and too little porridge. How could 5 prolongation elixirs be enough? Not to mention the secrets hidden in those territories, it was not a small matter to divide up these prolongation elixirs. The more than a dozen sect involved wanted to retreat, but the pressure of the 4 sect was there. They had no choice but to give up. At the end of the discussion, no one wanted to give up their own territory. The territory that could be exchanged by Yang Chen with the 5 revolution prolongation elixirs must be good things. They would hold it in their hands first. In the future, they could use other benefits to exchange what Yang Chen knew. Wouldn't it be a great benefit? Everyone thought like this. No one was a fool. Yang Chen's diversion technique was also seen by everyone. A mere human immortal junior wanted to play tricks in front of so many masters. It was not enough to see it. In my opinion, since it is so difficult to divide, it is better to discuss again and give them the Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, and Parting Hatred Sea. The representative of the Xiantian sect unexpectedly smiled and gave a suggestion. Anyway, Master Yang said that Chunyang Palace just wants a piece of territory. It doesn't matter where it is, right? Chapter 1544. As soon as the representative of the Xiantian sect spoke, the eyes of the representatives of the sect, who were arguing endlessly, immediately lit up. Everyone was fighting, not because they wanted to give up their own territory, but because they wanted others to give up their territory. Now that there was a good suggestion that they didn't need to argue about, everyone naturally turned their attention to this side and began to think about whether this was feasible or not. Speaking of which, this time, Chunyang Palace was a bit aggressive. Of course, it was not Chunyang Palace that was aggressive, but the 4 fairy immortal masters who had received a favor from Yang Chen and had to return it. Forcing other sects to give up their territory seemed a bit overbearing. However, which sect's territory was not won in the beginning? Yang Chen was already very kind to be willing to use the method of buying and selling. Not to mention some small sect that killed all day long, even the 5 major sects, such as Xiantian sect, Blue Cloud sect, Green Jade Immortal Island, 5 Elements sect, and Qiankuan sect. Didn't their ancestors fight for their territory in the beginning? It was just that no one dared to have any ideas now. There was no difference in essence. Since Yang Chen wanted to play tricks, then he couldn't blame others for targeting Chunyang Palace. How could those who could cultivate to the spiritual realm be fools? The only result of Yang Chen playing tricks was that he made a mistake, so he couldn't blame others. Good idea. Someone immediately agreed. In this way, Yang Chen's mouth was shut, so that he had nothing to say, and at the same time, everyone didn't have to give up their benefits. Even the 2 sect that Sunset Rock and Lin Yangchuan originally belonged to did not suffer a loss. 5 revolving life prolonging pills was definitely a profit. Those 2 places are not worth 5 revolving life prolonging pills. The representative of the Xiantian sect was very fair at this moment, and he spoke with a sense of righteousness. In my opinion, 4 is enough. What do you think? What else could everyone say? Apart from nodding, no one would say anything. When the people of the 4 major sects heard that the mysterious Heaven sect had taken the initiative to help them save a prolonging life pill, they were overjoyed. Why would they object? As for the other small sect members, as long as they didn't suffer any losses, they wouldn't have any objections. As for the 2 sect members involved, they weren't here, were they? Even if there was a representative present, even the mysterious Heaven sect had spoken, and the other 4 major sect had supported them from behind, how could they dare to say no? Although the mysterious Heaven sect was keeping a low profile, There were not many sects that dared to say no to the mysterious heaven sect. Previously, Xiantian sect could casually send out a human immortal disciple to make them reject 4 heaven immortal experts. Now, it was even easier to make them listen. All in favor. This was probably the most agreeable conclusion that everyone had reached after arguing for so long. Correspondingly, the Sunset Rock, Linyang River, and the hatred-parting sea would soon become the territory of Chunyang Palace. Moreover, it was recognized by the 5 major sects, including the mysterious heaven sect, and more than a dozen small and medium-sized sects. The other sects involved in several other places were very happy. The secret territory was still in their hands. They would know when they secretly contacted Yang Chun in the future. The 2 sect members of the Sunset Rock and Linyang River were also very happy. They thought that there was no hope, but suddenly they succeeded like magic. The 2 sect members could get 4-5 reincarnation life-prolonging pills, and they only had to pay 2 barren lands. It was definitely a good thing. The mysterious heaven sect was very happy. They had thwarted Yang Chen's little conspiracy and made Chunyang Palace suffer in silence, which was worth being happy about. The 4 major sects were also happy. They completed Yang Chen's request and got 6-5 reincarnation life-prolonging pills. Not only did they get the benefits, but they also returned Yang Chen's favor. It would be strange if they weren't happy. Of course, the happy people present would never think that the happiest person should be Yang Chen. From the beginning, what Yang Chen wanted was the Sunset Rock, Linyang River, and the hatred-parting sea. Now, after a lot of ups and downs, he was back to the starting point. Chunyang Palace still got these territories. They only paid a few life-prolonging pills, but they were recognized by the Spirit Realm sect. It was definitely a happy ending, if the sect members of Yenluo Mountain, Chessboard Mountain, Ice Field, and the Demon Buster Valley were not included in the small flaws that they might have in the future in order to explore the secrets of those places. However, at this time, no one would think about such a distant thing. It was the right thing to grasp the immediate benefits first. The 4 heaven immortal experts finally came to Chunyang Palace again with their chests puffed out and met Yang Chen. After completing Yang Chen's request, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief and didn't have to carry the heavy favor. Master Yang, fortunately, I didn't fail you. Elder Lu told the result to Yang Chen as soon as they met. Including the Xiantian sect, our 5 major sects will announce to the public today that the Sunset Rock, Linyang River, and the hatred-parting sea are the territories of Chunyang Palace from now on. Yang Chen obviously had a stunned expression on his face. Then, the expression quickly disappeared and was replaced by a happy smile. Really? Thank you for your hard work, seniors. I am very grateful. The 4 of them were all heaven immortal experts. How could the change of expression on Yang Chen's face escape their eyes? Thinking about it, it seemed that the 4 of them had done something wrong, so Elder Lu couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He stammered and said, Master Yang, it's not that we didn't try our best. It's just that the other places are more troublesome. We have disappointed Master Yang. Experts had their own pride. According to Yang Chen's request, the 4 heaven immortal experts could be said to have done it 100%. However, if they really wanted them to show a clear conscience, they really couldn't do it. This matter was their fault first. If they had known that it would end like this, it would have been better to directly exert enough pressure on the 2 sects at the beginning to make them submit. Then, it wouldn't have been as embarrassing as it was now. Of course, Yang Chen was also responsible. If he had stated the price of the exchange at the beginning, this situation wouldn't have happened. 10 5-fold life-prolonging pills would definitely be enough to make the sect masters of the 4 major sects come out directly. There was nothing that couldn't be done. Don't mention it. Seniors, you have worked hard. I only have gratitude in my heart. Yang Chen was overjoyed. It was definitely not an act. He was really happy. Although it wasn't surprising, when these territories were really in his hands, Yang Chen still felt that it was unreal. If he had these territories in his previous life, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. The four experts had been feeling very guilty. It was only when Yang Chun once again asked them to take care of their wives and concubines in their sect that the four of them felt a little better. In their hearts, they also decided that they would definitely take good care of Yang Chen's wives and concubines. When the seniors in the sect took care of the juniors, they didn't even need to say much. Others wouldn't have anything to say. At this point, Yang Chen's first important arrangement in the spiritual realm, the place where he settled down, had truly come to an end. Chapter 1545. Yang Chen readily handed over the 10 5-turn life-prolonging pills. Although the 4 fairy immortal masters felt a little guilty, they did not refuse. These pills were useful to them and their respective sect, so they must not be taken lightly. 4 prolonging pills would be divided equally among the 2 sect as the price for buying Sunset Rock and Linyangchuan. The 4 great sects would first get 1 from each side for the remaining 6. The last 2 were not easy to divide equally, so they could only discuss how to distribute them after returning to the sect. Yang Chen didn't care how the people of the 4 sect would distribute the prolonging pills. For Yang Chen, buying Sunset Rock and Linyangchuan with 10 5-turn life-prolonging pills was definitely a good business. It was just a few prolonging pills. If Yang Chen wanted them, he could refine them at any time. Although there were not many raw materials for the prolonging pill, Yang Chen had refined the core of the demon continent, and he could always use the demonic energy to accelerate the growth of the huge devilish bead. The raw materials for refining the prolonging pill were naturally endless. This was also a big income for Yang Chen in the future, and he would not be reluctant for a few prolonging pills. After obtaining the recognized territory of the 5 sect and a dozen small and medium-sized sect, Chunyang Palace began to prepare for the relocation of the palace. Fortunately, there were not many people, and there were only a dozen in total. Now the palaces were transformed from the Dragon Palace, and they could be taken away at any time. It didn't even take half a day, and everyone had already packed up. Yang Chen waved his hand and put away the Dragon Palace, then took everyone into the shuttle and flew towards Linyangchuan at high speed. The shape of Linyangchuan was a huge peninsula. Of course, since it was called a river, the terrain must be very flat. The sea surrounding Linyangchuan was the Sea of Hatred. The Sunset Rock was a steep mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of miles, separating Linyangchuan from the entire continent. The entire mountain range was made up of cliffs that were at least thousands of feet high. There was no way to climb them. It formed a natural barrier, like the huge wall of Linyang River. It was located in the west, and when the sun set, the slanting sunlight would illuminate the entire mountain range, hence the name Sunset Rock. Similarly, the Linyang River got its name because it bordered the Sunset Rock. The terrain of the Sunset Rock was so steep that even the natives of the spirit realm wouldn't live here. However, the Linyang River was different. The terrain was flat and fertile. Furthermore, it was close to the hatred-parting sea and had abundant production. It was the best place for the natives to live. The natives of the spiritual world were also humans, but they were different from the mortals in the mortal world. They were born with the strength of the gold core stage. After all, it was a place with 100 times the spiritual pressure. Even if one didn't cultivate, spiritual power would automatically enter the body. Naturally powerful strength was an advantage, but it also had a fatal weakness, which was that the spiritual realm was unable to trigger the 3 calamities. Whether it was the lightning tribulation, fire tribulation, or violent wind tribulation, none of them could descend upon the spiritual realm. So naturally, there was no need to mention tribulation transcendence. If they couldn't go through the calamity, their strength couldn't be improved. Even if their strength had surpassed the nascent soul stage and reached the Mahayana stage, and some of them had even reached the human immortal level, they couldn't be compared to the real human immortals without going through the calamity. Their situation was similar to the supreme experts in the mortal world, but they couldn't be compared to the supreme experts. At least the supreme experts in the mortal world had experienced the thunder calamity and fire calamity, and the strongest among the natives hadn't experienced any calamity. This was also the reason why the natives of the spiritual realm had a low status. Their status was like that of the mortals in the mortal world. Strictly speaking, they were not as good as the mortals. After all, the mortals still had the hope of cultivating and going through the calamity, but they didn't even have this chance. Of course, it wasn't that the natives didn't have a way to cultivate. It was just that no matter how they cultivated, without the baptism of heaven's calamity, their strength couldn't be improved, and they could only stay below the human immortal level. Even if they were in the human immortal realm, they couldn't compete with the real human immortal expert. Most of the sect would not consider recruiting the natives as disciples, but just use them as slaves. Because of their strength, the lifespan of the natives was many times longer than that of mortals. When serving the cultivators, they were naturally better than ordinary mortals. It took almost a few months for the Chunyang Palace team to arrive at their destination. The high speed of the shuttle compared with the speed of the fairy immortal masters was not a star and a half. The speed that Yang Chen was proud of in the past was no longer an advantage, unless the shuttle could be further improved under the sacrificial refining of Yang Chen. This was the territory that truly belonged to them. After landing, everyone in the Chunyang Palace felt a burst of emotion in their hearts. Subsequently, the palace master began to coordinate and find a suitable place to start building the real Chunyang Palace in the spiritual realm. Of course, the location was designated by Yang Chen, and no one had any objection to this. Linyang River had been searched once. In order to make up for their guilt, the 4 fairy immortal masters also told Yang Chen the results of the exploration. Although Yang Chen did not need the information they provided, at this time, this exploration data could cover up a lot of things. Yang Chen did not have much trouble, and directly designated a relatively strong spiritual vein on Linyang River, where the Chunyang Palace in the spiritual realm would be located. The construction of the mountain gate, of course, could not be done by the dozen masters of the Chunyang Palace. In the 100,000 miles of Linyang River, there were at least billions of natives. These natives were at the Jedon stage, and they were definitely the best craftsmen to build the mountain gate. In terms of the construction of the mountain gate, the experience of the palace master and elder Gao was far richer than that of Yang Chen. The design of the mountain gate of the Chunyang Palace on the Demon Continent was led by the palace master and elder Gao. Basically, after the address was set, there was nothing for Yang Chen to do. Several other elders were responsible for recruiting the natives and organizing the construction. Yang Chen's family and several masters of the monster race were temporarily idle. "Husband, what are we doing here?" Gong Sunling followed Yang Chen all the way to the seaside, and asked strangely, "Are we going to kill sea beasts?" As soon as they heard about killing sea beasts, Ho Yun, the old tree demon, and Shi Kuei and Xiesha, who also followed Yang Chen, were all excited. Looking at Yang Chen, their eyes were full of expectation. These guys, following Yang Chen to fight and kill, were used to enjoying. Although they had just destroyed the Chi Men sect not long ago, now they were obviously itching again. Kill sea beasts? Not for the time being. Yang Chen shook his head directly, staring at the vast sea, and replied with a smile, "Let's find a place to settle our family's manor first, and by the way, Long Xian will also be settled." After a pause, Yang Chen went on to say, "When you are settled, I will show you a little secret of the sea." Chapter 1546. Settle down in a manor? These words confused Ho Yun and the others. Where did this manor come from? However, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling understood very well that the manor that Yang Chen mentioned was clearly the original Zhao family manor in the mortal world. Now it should be the manor cave residence that fairy junkie of Xiantian sect renamed as Yang family manor. Is Junkie here too? Gao Yu asked with some surprise. Whether it was the Dragon Palace or the Yang family manor, it was her home. As long as it was a woman, she would be happy to settle down in her own home, even if she had cultivated to the 3rd grade of human immortal. Not for the time being, but I think she will be here soon. Yang Chen knew Tao Junkie's character. If Chunyang Palace was the temporary foothold of Qi Men's sect in the beginning, Tao Junkie might not necessarily appear, but knowing that Chunyang Palace had a real territory here, she would definitely come over. Of course, at this time, there was no need to wait for Tao Junkie's arrival here. Although Hatred Parting Sea was already the territory of Chunyang Palace, no one knew what was inside except for Yang Chen. Since they were already at the seaside, how could they still be patient? With Long Xian following them, entering the sea was a piece of cake. Long Xian did not return to his original huge size of 1,000 miles, but only controlled his body to about 10 feet, which was enough for everyone to sit on his back. When everyone sat down, Long Xian quietly led everyone into the water. Once in the water, Long Xian was like a fish in water. On land, Long Xian carried the merit monument on his back. While the massive amount of merit brought him incomparably safe protection, it also brought him great pressure. But in the sea, it seemed that everything was at least 10 times lighter. On Long Xian's back, a huge bubble suddenly appeared, enveloping everyone inside. Even if they were at the bottom of the sea, there was not much difference from being on the shore. Everyone had seen the ocean in the mortal world, but it was their first time seeing the ocean in the spiritual realm. On the surface, there seemed to be no difference, but after entering the water, they immediately discovered the difference. Just like the natives of the spiritual realm, the weakest fish in the sea seemed to be at least at the foundation establishment stage, and this was just a small fry that had just been born. There were simply countless large underwater creatures with cultivation bases at the nascent soul and Mahayana stages. From the coast to the bottom of the sea, in a distance of less than 2,000 miles, he had encountered at least a dozen sea fish hundreds of feet in size at the peak Yuanying stage or the early Mahayana stage, and during this period, he was also entangled by 4 or 5 kelp-like plants. It was fortunate that the aura of a grade 5 Earth Immortal Realm cultivator was released. Be it the fishes or the kelp, none of them dared to get too close to him. Hu! Shi Kuei and Xie Sha both heaved a sigh of relief. When they knew Yang Chen, he was also the overlord of the barren sand valley. Now, seeing that the lowest level of the demon race was more prosperous than them, they could not help but sigh. And this was only the weak sea beasts within 2,000 kilometers of the coast. If they went deeper and wider into the sea, who knew what kind of terrifying fellows there would be? Under the guidance of Yang Chen, Long Xian was very strange, and kept cruising in a certain direction on the bottom of the sea. The strange situation made everyone a little puzzled. However, Yang Chen must have his reasons for doing things. Everyone just waited to see the result, but no one asked. Anyway, they would know the result soon. There was no need to rush to explore now. As a human immortal level cultivator, they still had this kind of mentality. This tour lasted for more than a day. They didn't know how many laps they had turned. There was no compass or anything like that under the sea. Everyone had already lost their way. They didn't know how far they were from the coast now. Anyway, everyone was very deep under the sea. The huge water pressure was a little difficult for everyone's body to resist, and they had to use their cultivation base to resist. It's almost there. Yang Chen finally spoke to everyone. The words, almost there, aroused everyone's interest again, and they released their spiritual awareness to explore. At such a deep bottom of the sea, there was no light that could penetrate, and it was dark all around. The strange thing was that even though they had seen many strong sea beasts along the way, they couldn't find a single one here. The result of using their spiritual awareness to explore was that within a radius of 1,000 miles, there was nothing at all. Relying on the light that Long Xian created to illuminate everyone looked at Yang Chen suspiciously, waiting for him to give an explanation. Long Xian, dig down. It's at least 3,000 feet deep. Yang Chen still didn't explain. He casually sent out a spot of light that landed a few hundred miles ahead of them as he instructed. Without any hesitation, Long Xian's body expanded rapidly. Before long, he had reverted to his original form of a black tortoise. With a single swipe of his claws, he dug a few hundred feet deep. After a few swipes, he reached the depth that Yang Chen mentioned. When they were only halfway down, everyone could clearly feel that something was wrong. A burst of spiritual power that was many times denser than the surrounding came from below, making people feel refreshed. After Long Xian dug a few more times, the spiritual power became denser and denser. It was even stronger than the spiritual vein that was located in Chunyang Palace. Spiritual vein? Gao Yu was the first to say in surprise, and the others nodded their heads. With such dense spiritual power, it would be strange if it wasn't a spiritual vein. However, how could this spiritual vein be hidden so deep? They didn't know how deep the seabed was, but the spiritual vein was actually more than 3,000 feet deep. Heaven Immortal Grade Spiritual Vein. Old Tree Demon said decisively. Relatively speaking, Old Tree Demon and the others had been in the spiritual world for hundreds of years, and some of their knowledge of the spiritual world was far stronger than Gao Yu and Gong Sunling. They could immediately judge the grade of the spiritual vein from the aura it emitted. The grade of spiritual vein in the spiritual world was determined according to Human Immortal, Earth Immortal, and Heaven Immortal. Of course, as the name suggested, Human Immortal grade spiritual vein could meet the needs of Human Immortal cultivators. Earth Immortal grade could meet the needs of Earth Immortal cultivators, and Heaven Immortal grade could meet the needs of Heaven Immortal cultivators. The spiritual vein in Linyang River where Chunyang Palace was located was a Human Immortal grade spiritual vein. At best, it was enough for hundreds or thousands of Human Immortal experts to cultivate. For the current Chunyang Palace, it was enough. However, it was far from enough to adapt to the development of a big sect. Basically, all spiritual veins in Linyang River were of this grade, which was also one of the reasons why no one was interested in this place. It could only meet the needs of Human Immortals. Once there was an Earth Immortal expert, no one would know where to go to cultivate. No matter how big or small the sect was, they wouldn't pay attention to it. Occasionally, there would be a few rogue cultivators who would naturally leave after their cultivation improved. Chapter 1547. Even if she had no idea about the level of spiritual veins, when she heard the Old Tree Demon's affirmation, Gao Yu knew that this must be the Fairy Immortal level spiritual vein that the Old Tree Demon mentioned. This time, they found a Fairy Immortal level spiritual vein. This time, Chunyang Palace did not have to worry about the problem of insufficient spiritual veins for long-term development. With this spiritual vein, it was enough for everyone to cultivate to the Fairy Immortal level. No one knew how Yang Chen knew that there was such a spiritual vein here, but it was certain that the discovery of this spiritual vein had completely solved the bottleneck of Chunyang Palace's development for at least 5,000 or 6,000 years. For a sect that had no foundation in the spiritual realm, this was enough. As for how it would develop after 5,000 or 6,000 years, it was a matter for the future. Moreover, such a long time might be enough for Yang Chen to find opportunities for further development. No one would doubt that Yang Chen could not solve this problem. From the beginning, when Yang Chen spared no effort to find a site for Chunyang Palace, everyone knew that Yang Chen must have a series of solutions. This point had already been proven in the mortal world. Long Xian's movements continued, and he did not stop just because he found the spiritual vein. His huge claws began to become nimble, slowly expanding along the opening of the spirit vein, only stopping when it reached the widest diameter of the spirit vein. It had to be said that the quality of this spiritual vein was far beyond everyone's expectations. Now, the big opening of the spiritual vein was more than 2 or 3 times larger than when it was first dug. It had formed a large spiritual vein exit with a diameter of tens of feet. At this point, the true appearance of the spiritual vein appeared in front of everyone. The previous estimation of the fairy immortal level spiritual vein by the old tree demon was still a bit vague, or not particularly accurate enough. This was indeed a fairy immortal level spiritual vein. To be exact, it was a high-level fairy immortal level spiritual vein, which could at least support the cultivation of a cultivator to the 6th or 7th level of the fairy immortal level. Not to mention other things, this spiritual vein alone was at least 50% higher than the spiritual vein in the territory of Chiman sect. The largest spirit vein, there was only an early-stage heaven immortal grade, which was far less promising than this newly discovered spirit vein. Long Xian, can you cover this spirit vein and prevent the spiritual energy from leaking out? While everyone was still celebrating, Yang Chen had already started asking Long Xian. Before Long Xian could reply, everyone froze for a moment before understanding what was going on. Now, all the cultivators in Chunyang Palace, including Yang Chen, excluding Long Xian, the strongest was only Ho Yun, who was a grade 5 human immortal. All of them were human immortals and didn't need this level of spiritual vein. Since everyone was at this level, there was no need to expose this spirit vein and attract the attention of the sect. It was only natural for Long Xian to cover him up. But for the people in Chunyang Palace, it meant something different. Eating a meal without knowing the next one and knowing that there was a mountain of gold and silver waiting for them to move, in terms of mentality, there was a very different difference between the two. The mentality of the cultivators was the same. They only knew that they had a human immortal spiritual vein, but they didn't know what to do when they reached the earth immortal realm. It was completely different from knowing that their own sect had already discovered a heaven immortal grade spiritual vein waiting for them to come and cultivate. Two different mentalities had a fatal impact on cultivation. Presumably, after the palace master heard about this spirit vein, they would be full of confidence when they cultivated in the future. The promotion of well-founded confidence for cultivation could be completely seen from the cultivation path of Master Wang Yong. At that time, Master Wang Yong had completely lost confidence. Not to mention ascending, even entering the Deshang stage was difficult. But when Yang Chen took out the heaven-seizing pill, it immediately became completely different. Knowing that as long as he entered the Deshang stage, he would definitely be able to ascend, Master Wang Yong's state of mind immediately improved by at least one realm, and the results of the later cultivation were completely different. Now that the same situation was staged, the entire Chunyang Palace would have an earth-shaking change in mentality. It was estimated that this was the fundamental reason why Yang Chen took everyone to find this heaven immortal spiritual vein as soon as he came up. It's difficult to fully absorb it. Long Xian was honest, listening to Yang Chen's question. He replied immediately after a little consideration. Bien, who carried the merit monument, could not be regarded as an ordinary monster race. The strength of the Dragon Clan was also very prominent in the descendants. But even so, Long Xian still did not dare to give a definite answer. I just let you cover it, not let you fully absorb it. Yang Chen stamped Long Xian's foot in amusement. Did this guy really think that he was a descendant of the Dragon Clan, so he felt lawless? This level of heaven immortal spiritual vein, not to mention Long Xian's mere earth immortal grade 5 cultivation base, even if it was replaced by a heaven immortal grade 5 master, he would not dare to say that he could fully absorb the spiritual power inside. If he didn't absorb it and only covered it, then it wouldn't be too difficult for Long Xian. Long Xian's massive body was 1,000 miles in radius, so it was easy for him to cover the exit of a spiritual vein that was tens of feet in diameter. Originally, when this spiritual vein was buried under the sea, everyone would not be able to sense it. How could Long Xian's body be just that thick? That was not all. To Long Xian, his body was blocking the spiritual vein, which meant that his body would always be nourished by the heaven immortal spiritual vein. For ordinary cultivators, recklessly absorbing a spiritual vein that was of a higher level than them would be a disaster. But for Long Xian, who had the Bien's bloodline, it was a rare and wonderful thing. Moreover, he had a huge amount of merit to protect him, which allowed him to enjoy this heaven immortal spiritual vein all by himself. Without a word, Long Xian took a few steps forward, and his entire body covered the spiritual vein tightly. Not a single trace of spiritual power leaked out, and it was completely covered by Long Xian. Even though everyone was very close to him, they could not feel a single trace of spiritual power. Husband, when you found the spiritual vein, you took so many detours. What kind of formation is this? Gong Sunling was proficient in formations, and she was also concerned about formations now. She finally found a chance to ask. Gong Sunling had been studying this formation for 2 days, but she had no clue. She could only ask her husband. What kind of formation is this? It's just a natural maze. Yang Chen smiled and replied, the reason why I took so many detours was because I couldn't accurately find this place on the sea. What kind of formation is this? Gong Sunling heard the words and suddenly blushed, or she thought that things were complicated. She couldn't feel any spiritual power ripples, so she thought it was some complicated formation. She didn't expect it to be this. Husband, is this the secret of the hatred parting sea that you were talking about? Seeing that Gong Sunling was a little embarrassed, she quickly changed the topic and asked Yang Chen. Chapter 1548. It's just an ordinary spiritual vein, how can it be regarded as the secret of the sea? This question made Yang Chen smile bitterly again. However, it was his wife who didn't understand the situation twice in a row, so Yang Chen explained in detail. There must be a spirit vein of heaven immortal level in the sea, this is clear to all the sect. Yang Chen knew that the two women had only been in the spiritual world for a short time and many things were not very clear, so he explained patiently, it's just that there are almost none near the coast. If it's far away in the sea, this kind of spiritual vein is occupied by powerful sea beasts. If you want to compete for it, you need to pay a great price. Just like in the mortal world, everyone knows that there must be a powerful spiritual vein in the sea, but except for the Green Jade Immortal Island and the South China Sea Alliance, which have a series of islands as a foothold, other sects rarely open a spiritual vein in the sea. Even the powerful sect like the Zhao family only absorbs spiritual power from Long Xian instead of directly occupying the spiritual vein on the seabed. The reason is the same, a powerful spiritual vein will inevitably attract powerful sea beasts. If you want to snatch it first, you have to pay a considerable price, the gain is not worth the loss, unless you have a super powerful magic weapon like the Dragon Clan Sea Map that can directly absorb spiritual power, otherwise no one is willing to take the risk. This is the case in the mortal world, and the same is true in the spiritual world. So everyone understands that there must be a spirit vein of heaven immortal level in the sea, but no sect will be willing to occupy it. Now that Yang Chen discovered this immortal spirit vein, it was an extremely rare offshore spirit vein. First, this spiritual vein is relatively hidden and no one has discovered it so far. Second, it is close to the coast, and powerful sea beasts generally will not appear in this distance, so it was convenient for Yang Chen. Of course, Yang Chen knew about this spiritual vein because of the memory of his previous life. In his memory, this spirit vein was discovered 3,000 years later. At that time, the cultivators had already retreated to the Sunset Rock, the overlooking Sun River and the resentful parting sea. The spirit veins on the ground were simply not enough for everyone to cultivate. Under the search of thousands of heaven immortal masters, this offshore spiritual vein was discovered, but it took thousands of heaven immortal masters for a full 30 years. With this memory, Yang Chen naturally didn't need to waste any more time. He could just find it directly. The reason why they had to go around in circles was also because of what Yang Chen had said before. There was no point of reference on the surface of the sea. They had to go to the bottom of the sea to find the natural maze and then walk over it step by step. What is the secret of the hatred parting sea? Everyone's interest was immediately aroused. Gong Sunling also forgot the little embarrassment from before and asked curiously. Let's go now. It's not far from here. Yang Chen did not disappoint them. He stood up and prepared to move. Because Long Xian had to cover up the spirit vein, he was left behind. In a place like this, with the support of the Merit and Virtue Monument and the insanely rich spirit vein, Long Xian could cultivate the Dragon Clan's cultivation techniques recorded in the second level of the Dragon Tower in a short period of time. For cultivators, the higher the grade of the spirit vein, the better it was for their cultivation. The most suitable one was the best. Directly using a spirit vein that exceeded one's own level would not bring any additional benefits other than wasting spiritual power. Everyone understood this logic. Therefore, no one dared to be entangled here and followed Yang Chen to see the true secret of the hatred-parting sea. This time around, everyone entered Yang Chen's flying shuttle and flew towards a certain direction. After a while, everyone felt the flying shuttle come to a stop. We're here. Everyone was a little surprised. Even though Yang Chen said that it wasn't far from here, everyone felt that it was at least 1,000 miles away. It had only been a cup of tea's time, and they had actually arrived. Appearing at the bottom of the sea once more, everyone used their spiritual senses to explore the surroundings. It was still empty and there seemed to be nothing at all. They did not know what the secret Yang Chen was talking about was. But since it was a secret, everyone wanted to find it out on their own. At least, it would be more interesting that way. Don't tell us first. We'll look for it ourselves. When they were underwater, Ho Yun, who had the water attribute, seemed to have returned home as he began to jump up and down in search. These days after his ascension, he had been stifled to death. Even after killing those people from Chiman's sect, he hadn't been able to fully vent his frustrations. It just so happened that there was a game to pass the time. He couldn't let Yang Chen reveal the mystery at once. Of course, Yang Chen was well behaved and did not intend to reveal it. After taking everyone to the place, he looked at it with a smile. Everyone put on an adventurous posture, looking for it bit by bit, like children playing hide and seek. It was rare for a human immortal cultivator to have this kind of childlike innocence. Yang Chen naturally would not spoil the fun. This sea area seemed to be very calm. There were no winds and waves, and the bottom of the sea was flat. There were various kinds of seabed creatures, but they were not enough to threaten everyone. Feeling the murderous aura emanating from Ho Yun, they had already escaped far away. Only Yang Chen and a few others were here. No matter how everyone explored with their spiritual senses, they couldn't find any secrets here. In impatience, Ho Yun held his big stick and imitated the previous actions of Black Tortoise. He plunged the stick into the deep bottom of the sea, as if he wanted to find something from the ground. Others also followed suit and began to have the idea of exploring the bottom of the sea. Shi Kuei and Xie Sha were both of the earth attribute. They directly went underground, searched slowly, and had a lot of fun. Even Gao Yu showed a rare lively look, digging around and looking around. Yang Chen's spiritual senses had never left Gao Yu's side. When she was in the mortal world, Gao Yu could be said to be an extremely respected supreme elder. How could she show such an expression? Only when she arrived in the spiritual world, she was no longer a high and mighty great elder, but a newcomer who had just ascended. The change in identity made Gao Yu have such a relaxed expression. Such a rare calm and serene expression. Yang Chen was going to be crazy. Husband, look. While he was obsessed, Gong Xuanling's whisper suddenly came to Yang Chen's ear. In fact, Gao Yu's heart had always been on Yang Chen. When she was playing, she suddenly heard the voice of Gong Sunling. She immediately rushed over and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Did you find the secret?" Gong Sunling shook her head directly. She was the only one who did not play treasure hunting games except Yang Chen. The reason for this was that there had been some small changes in the Mountain River geographical map. As early as in the mortal world, Gong Xuanling's Mountain River geographical map had already absorbed the East Sea nautical map in the Dragon Palace, and later absorbed the fragmented South Sea nautical map. They were all magic weapons refined by the Dragon clan. After integrating the two nautical maps, the Mountain River geographical map was particularly sensitive to the geography of the water system. In the spiritual world, the Mountain River geographical map had been constantly adding the geography of the spiritual world, but when it returned to the Hatred Parting Sea, it quickly simulated the marine geography. Chapter 1549. Gong Sunling didn't find anything unusual before and just thought that it was a normal situation in the Mountain River geographical map. However, she suddenly found that there seemed to be something more in the Mountain River geographical map. With Gong Sunling's movement, Yang Chen and Gao Yu quickly changed places and appeared in the Mountain River geographical map, and Gong Sunling also appeared beside the two. In front of the three of them was a huge square. It was not particularly appropriate to say that it was a square, it was clearly a huge stone slab. On the stone slab there was a clear outline, and within that outline there was a very dazzling bright spot. Around the bright spot there were a few dim but equally flickering spots. This huge stone slab felt familiar to Yang Chen at first glance, and the outline that appeared was also a little familiar. After thinking about it carefully, he suddenly reacted and pointed to the stone slab and asked in surprise, "This is the stone slab of the East China Sea map? There is also the South China Sea map, it has been fused together." Gong Sunling replied quickly. Both sea maps were produced by the Dragon clan, the same material, the same technique, and the same function. It was very normal to be able to fuse them together. But what is this place? Gao Yu pointed to the clear outline and asked with a frown. She had also seen the sea maps of the mortal world, and she also knew what the East China Sea and South China Sea looked like, but this place was very strange, and she had never seen it before. "This is the sea map of the Hatred Parting Sea." Yang Chen took over the conversation and said the answer. He pointed to the brightest spot and continued, "That bright spot is the spiritual vein that Long Xian is now covering." With Yang Chen's confirmation, Gong Sunling finally confirmed that this was the sea map of the Hatred Parting Sea. When it first appeared, Gong Sunling couldn't believe it and thought that something had changed, but now she was completely relieved. After all, the magic weapon of the Dragon clan was extraordinary. The sea map of the mortal world could still show the distribution of the sea in the spiritual world. Yang Chen walked to the side of the bright spot that symbolized the spiritual vein and reached out to touch it. Immediately, he felt a majestic spiritual energy gushing out. It was the feeling of a heaven immortal level spiritual vein. This sea map still retained the powerful effects of the mortal world. Just this alone was enough to make Yang Chen smile. In this way, as long as Gong Sunling ran around the surrounding ocean, there would be no need to struggle with those powerful sea beasts for the spiritual veins. She could directly absorb spiritual power from the sea map. "Hubby, didn't you say that the Hatred Parting Sea definitely has a sky immortal spirit vein? How come I only see one here?" Gong Sunling's questions followed. Those dim spots were definitely ordinary human immortal grade or even weaker spirit veins. There was no sign of other heaven immortal grade spirit veins. The sea map has just been formed and needs to be perfected. Yang Chen guessed with a smile. As long as we have enough time, or if we run to enough places, we will be able to make up for it. A Ling, this time we are in an invincible position. With this killer weapon, Yang Chen's family and Chunyang Palace could almost be said to have no worries. Just wait for more and more masters to ascend, and Chunyang Palace would be more and more prosperous. At this point, Yang Chen had already made arrangements. After the ascension of the palace master in the mortal world, Yang Chen restrained other disciples of Chunyang Palace who had already reached the edge of ascension and postponed their ascension for hundreds of years. The reason was that Chunyang Palace had no foundation in the spiritual world. Even if they ascended, they might be suppressed in vain. Yang Chun had told those masters in the mortal world that they would wait for 100 years after Yang Chun ascended. On the one hand, these masters guarded the Chunyang Palace in the mortal world. On the other hand, by the time they ascended, Yang Chun must have taken root in the spiritual world and arranged everything so that they would not be suppressed. It could be said that now Chunyang Palace had territory and spiritual veins. They were just waiting for the population to flourish, and the day of their rise was just around the corner. Knowing that the change in the sea map was a good thing, the three of them were no longer worried and once again returned to the bottom of the sea. Ho Yun and the old tree demon were still searching. The old tree demon was particularly exaggerated. He directly plunged his roots into the bottom of the sea and directly spread hundreds of miles. The movement of the underground could not be hidden from him. However, under such a big move, the four demon race masters did not find anything unusual here, let alone find any secrets. However, everyone was not discouraged and still played in full swing. Yang Chun had been sitting in the undersea pavilion prepared by Gong Sunling for several days. With the mountain river geographical map, it was easy to make such an undisturbed pavilion on the bottom of the sea. Sitting in the pavilion, Yang Chun ate dishes, drank wine, and watched everyone play games. His life was so comfortable that it was a mess. Unfortunately, a secret was a secret. Even with the addition of Gong Sunling, a master who had the mountain river geographical map and could almost cheat, everyone did not find out what the secret Yang Chun said was. More than a month later, Ho Yun was the first to lose patience. He stepped into the pavilion very unhappily, grabbed the wine pot on the table, and poured it into his mouth. After drinking, he sat down and began to mutter, "It's boring! It's really boring!" For more than a month, everyone had almost dug 3 feet into the ground, but they found nothing. Everyone's divine awareness could probably sweep all over the place, but they did not find any clues. If they didn't know that Yang Chun would definitely not deceive everyone on this, everyone would have suspected that there was nothing worth paying attention to here at all. With Ho Yun taking the lead, everyone began to return one by one. Everyone returned without success, and the expression on their faces was a little lost. The secret that has been kept for thousands of years, if it can be easily discovered by you, what kind of secret is it? Yang Chun couldn't help laughing. If that's the case, it would have been discovered and taken away long ago. How can it be our turn? It was very reasonable, but everyone was a little annoyed that they couldn't find it. It was not that they really had any heart demons. When the last old tree demon also put away his roots and came to the pavilion to drink, Gao Yu pushed Yang Chun gently. "It's time for you to solve the mystery." Yang Chun stood up with a smile and walked out slowly. Everyone's eyes and spiritual awareness all closely followed Yang Chun's figure, and from time to time they frantically explored around him, hoping to find something at the last moment. After walking for about 100 steps, Yang Chun finally stopped. After everyone's divine awareness explored him frantically again, they still found nothing and could only give up. This little secret of Lihan Sea is actually here. Yang Chun bent down and picked up a small conch at his feet with 3 fingers and put it in the palm of his hand. Chapter 1550. A conch, not even half a finger, did not need 3 fingers, even 2 fingers could be picked up. In the sea, such a conch was not known how many, who would care about a small and insignificant conch. There was a faint fluctuation of spiritual power on the conch, which was very weak. This was not surprising. The creatures of the spiritual world, from the beginning of birth, had the power of the foundation stage, and it was the most normal thing to have spiritual power fluctuations on their bodies. If there were no such fluctuations, everyone would feel strange. In the exploration of everyone's spiritual awareness, this kind of creature with low spiritual power fluctuations was not considered at all. Most of the marine creatures fled far away after feeling Ho Yun's momentum, but there were some exceptions, like this conch, which did not have a particularly fast speed and could not escape far at all. They could only shrink their whole body in the shell to avoid it. At the bottom of the sea parting hatred, there were hundreds of millions of conches like this. Who would pay attention to this kind of dust-like thing? Who could have thought that there would be a secret hidden in this thing that everyone could not find? What is inside? Everyone was shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. As Yang Chen said, it could be easily found by everyone. It would definitely not be a secret that could be kept until the present. Everyone was a cultivator and knew the magic of the word fate. No one cared if they could not find it. However, everyone was curious about what was inside that could be treated as a secret by Yang Chen so seriously. I don't know for the time being. Yang Chen smiled and gave everyone such an answer. Just when everyone couldn't help but smile bitterly again, Yang Chen suddenly told everyone, "Old Ho, Old Gui, after you go in, you have to be more careful." It was obvious that Yang Chen knew how to mobilize everyone's enthusiasm. With just one sentence, Ho Yun and Old Gui were excited. Shi Kuei and Xie Sha were also ready to fight and were ready to fight. Seeing that everyone was ready, Yang Chen gave everyone a gesture, and then everyone's eyes were dazzled, and they all disappeared in place and appeared in a strange place. This was a huge space. Looking at it, one could not see the end at a glance. The initial estimate was no less than tens of thousands of miles. Although the ground was very wide, the shape of the sky was very strange. It was a very familiar spiral. Combined with the conch in Yang Chen's hand, there was no doubt that the sky was in the shape of a conch. The most amazing thing was that the space was completely a world of water. Even though it looked no different from the land, it was because the water that filled the entire space was abnormally clear and transparent. In the end, this was just an underwater palace. Everyone was at the entrance of the huge underwater mansion. What entered their eyes was a tall decorated archway that pierced through the clouds. The words on the decorated archway had been soaked in water for who knew how many years, and had long been dilapidated. Some unfamiliar aquatic vines grew all over it, and it could no longer be seen clearly. While everyone was still sizing him up, Ho Yun's figure suddenly flashed, and he appeared hundreds of feet away. He raised the golden rod in his hand high and smashed it in front of him. Boom! A huge sound wave traveled from the water to everyone's ears. It was much more powerful than the sound wave on land. The empty space in front of Ho Yun was directly smashed out a huge pit by this rod. It's just that, apart from this, there was nothing else. Everyone's divine senses detected the shadow that flashed by, but Ho Yun's attack was in vain, and he did not even touch the other party's hair. The other party's figure was too fast. Even Ho Yun did not catch up. This time, everyone suddenly became serious. Sure enough, it was a fight worth looking forward to. Ho Yun's face showed the kind of excited grin, making people unable to help but feel creepy. The old tree demon rushed forward for over 100 miles, then quickly took root. In an instant, the ground within a radius of several hundred miles was covered by the old tree demon's root. The huge canopy of the tree also quickly spread out for hundreds of miles, protecting everyone under the tree. Among the monster race, when it came to physical strength, no one could match Ho Yun, but when it came to the strength of the spiritual awareness, even Ho Yun was inferior in front of the old tree demon. Soon, the old tree demon noticed the location of the other party's real body and began to attack frantically. The other party didn't seem to want to confront the old tree demon Ho Yun head-on. As soon as he started, he quickly left. In the water, the other party's speed was amazing, a few points faster than Yang Chen's shuttle. Shi Kuei also showed his real body. Although it was an earth attribute viper, it was equally flexible in the water. With a twist of his body, he appeared dozens of miles away, waiting for the opportunity to capture the figure of the other party. Xie Sha was a sand scorpion. He had no advantage in the water, and could only maintain a general speed. At the moment, he did not try to be brave. Together with Yang Chen, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, he slowly walked towards the real body of the old tree demon. For the monster race, the most effective way of cultivation was to fight. At the beginning, Chunyang Palace was weak, and they could only suppress their nature. Now with Yang Chen, they didn't have to care so much at all, just fight with all their strength. With such an opportunity, how could they easily let it go? By the way, don't kill him directly. Yang Chen's voice came from the water to the ears of Ho Yun and the old tree demon Shi Kuei. If you want to control this underwater mansion, you can't do it without him. What a disappointment! Ho Yun couldn't help but complain. He couldn't help but be happy. If he didn't kill the opponent, how could he enjoy it? Wait until you can catch up with him before talking about other things. Yang Chen laughed and ignored Ho Yun's discomfort. He made a space beside the trunk of the old tree demon and once again asked Gong Sunling to make the pavilion. The husband and wife, plus Yesha, sat in the pavilion and continued to rest and drink. The old tree demon's spiritual awareness clearly captured the figure of the opponent several times, but when he and Ho Yun wanted to fight, the opponent always escaped quickly, making Ho Yun and Shi Kuei always yell in anger. Cowardly rat, if you have the guts, fight with Uncle Ho. Ho Yun finally couldn't help it. He used his full cultivation base and shouted into the space. The loud voice quickly spread throughout the underwater mansion, but the opponent didn't seem to hear it at all and ignored it. He still approached carefully from a distance, and left immediately when he found something wrong. Even if the old tree demon Ho Yun and Shi Kuei tried their best, there was no way to make the opponent stop. This situation lasted for almost 4 or 5 days. Ho Yun and Shi Kuei had been provoked and filled with anger. Only the old tree demon was still unusually calm and still keenly captured the opponent's figure. Finally, the opponent seemed to be familiar with their clamor and began to try to fight against Ho Yun and the old tree demon. Chapter 1551. Compared to the beginning when he ran away before he even touched him, the opponent has now improved a lot. Of course, this was the feeling of Ho Yun and Shi Kuei. The other party also seemed to understand that the old tree demon's spiritual awareness was powerful and did not dare to contact the old tree demon. So far, except for Yang Chen, no one has been able to understand what the opponent was. Even Gao Yu Gong Sunling, whose spiritual awareness had reached the 6th grade of human immortal, was the same. The other party's speed was too fast, and everyone's spiritual awareness in the water could not keep up with the other party's figure. Perhaps after taking a few attacks from Shi Kuei, he found that he didn't seem to be able to cause much damage to himself, so the other party had more contact with Ho Yun and Shi Kuei. Ho Yun was keenly aware of this. It must be said that in terms of fighting, Ho Yun had an unusual intuition. After discovering this, Ho Yun began to hide his strength moderately, lowering his cultivation level to the same level as Shi Kuei, and also began to fight with the hidden monster. The sound of fighting rang out one after another, and the battle seemed to have begun to become a stalemate. When it was discovered that Ho Yun and Shi Kuei really couldn't bring him any more damage, the other party's courage grew and he got closer and closer. Unlike the beginning, when he found something wrong, he fled immediately. The old tree demon and Ho Yun have been working together for many years, quietly watching Ho Yun and Shi Kuei slowly lead the unknown opponent to the center of his canopy. When the time was right, Ho Yun and the old tree demon both shot in an instant, revealing their fangs that had been tolerated until now. Boom boom boom, 3 attacks accurately hit the opponent's body. This time, because the 3 guys had planned for a long time, they hit from 3 directions at the same time. The other party couldn't even run away, and could only fall into the encirclement of the 3 guys. The other party finally revealed his figure. After seeing it, everyone took a breath of cold air. The opponent, who had always been slippery and fast, turned out to be a very small killer whale. The length was less than 3 feet, and the fat body didn't show the fierceness of the killer whale at all, but it was very cute. This place was really a bit mystical. The huge underwater mansion was hidden in a tiny conch that couldn't be any smaller, and inside the underwater mansion, there was a killer whale whose original body should have been very huge, but now it was very small. The world was really big, nothing was too strange. They thought that the joint attack of the three of them would make the little killer whale dizzy and then surrender, but what they didn't expect was that the little killer whale's body just shook a little, and then everyone saw the fat on its body tremble a few times, and then nothing happened. The three people's confident attacks fell on the little killer whale's body, but it only made its fat tremble a few times? This was simply a disgrace. Ho Yun knew that although he had held back, even an earthly immortal expert would have to temporarily avoid that blow. But in the face of such a little killer whale, it actually took his blow as if nothing had happened. How could this extraordinary shame and humiliation be possible? Don't even think about leaving. Take another strike from me. Ho Yun was furious and shouted at the little killer whale. The muscles of his whole body bulged to the limit. He raised the golden giant stick high, and then smashed it heavily at the head of the little killer whale. As for what Yang Chen said just now about sparing his life, he had already forgotten about it. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, an accident occurred. The little killer whale's body suddenly enlarged, and in an instant, it became hundreds of meters long. Before Ho Yun's cudgel smashed down, its huge tail heavily whipped Ho Yun. Bang! Ho Yun, together with his stick, flew out like a cannonball, and was directly whipped 100 miles away by the tail. The sudden change made the old tree demon Shi Kuei stunned in place. Such a situation of being whipped away had always happened to Ho Yun's opponents, but this time it was completely reversed, and it was Ho Yun who was whipped away. How was this possible? The old tree demon, Shi Kuei, and Xie Sha were very clear about Ho Yun's strength. Even if the three of them combined their strength, they were not his opponent. All the monster race in the entire Chunyang Palace seemed to be able to fight Ho Yun together. What was the cultivation of this killer whale? How could it be so terrifying? Another question also floated in everyone's mind. Since the killer whale's cultivation was so powerful, how could it escape before it was touched? Ho Yun's roar followed his body all the way to this side. This time, Ho Yun was really furious. When did the mighty Ape King suffer such a big loss? He, who was known for his strength, was whipped away. This could be tolerated, what could not be tolerated? Ho Yun was still in place, but he had already shown his true appearance. The huge mighty Ape King rushed over here with his teeth bared. The ferocity of his face could be imagined without looking. In the face of Ho Yun's ferocity, the killer whale was stunned at first, then his face changed and he showed his teeth to Ho Yun in the distance. More than 20 long conical teeth were like huge, sharp blades. Coupled with the various ferocious expressions on the huge killer whale's face, it was really frightening. Even Ho Yun, who rushed all the way, could not help but change his face. However, who was Ho Yun? The fiercer the opponent, the more he liked it. The killer whale showed such a posture. Ho Yun was not angry but happy. He shouted again, "It doesn't count. If you have the guts, you can eat my stick." With Ho Yun's cry, the huge mighty Ape King had jumped high in the water, and the golden giant stick instantly became longer and larger, smashing fiercely towards the head of the killer whale. The killer whale seemed to have thoroughly figured out the details of the three people in the attack just now. At this moment, he did not dodge and faced Ho Yun's giant stick head-on. Bang! The giant stick hit the killer whale's head firmly this time. However, the killer whale that Ho Yun expected to be hit by a stick did not appear. Instead, his hand was soft. He felt that the giant stick seemed to have hit a pile of cotton and began to sink softly. On the chubby body of the killer whale, there was a trace of being pressed down. The giant stick was in the middle of that trace, and was quickly covered by the fat on both sides and could no longer be seen. The stick that Ho Yun smashed down with all his strength was exhausted little by little in this soft fat, and finally completely lost its strength. Then the pile of fat began to slowly recover to its original state, and Ho Yun's giant stick was gently bounced away from his body. Is this also possible? Not only Ho Yun, even the old tree demon Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, even Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, did not expect such a situation. The full strength of the mighty ape king in the realm of river-turning strength was easily taken by a pile of fat? Chapter 1552. In the eyes of the killer whale there was not much surprise. Looking at the stunned crowd, especially Ho Yun, he slowly shook his head. That kind of disdainful eyes made Ho Yun almost die of shame and indignation. The most powerful master of the Chunyang Palace, when was he ever looked at with such eyes? It has always been him who looked down on all living beings. When has he ever been looked down upon like this? When Ho Yun was only in the Deshang stage, he met the great master Chu Yulong. At first, the great masters also had such eyes, but later, all of them turned into panic and shock, which shocked a large number of people. Ho Yun, who was unstoppable in the world, was ridiculed by a fat killer whale in this unknown and mysterious underwater mansion. Moreover, it was an undisguised contempt. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how the guys who died under Ho Yun's big stick would feel, or how happy they would be. Of course, the dead guy had no chance to express his emotions, but Ho Yun, who was alive, still couldn't accept such a shame and humiliation. With a loud cry, the golden stick was raised again and slammed down on the face of the killer whale, who stayed in place. The banging sound kept ringing, but the sound was not the sound of a straightforward head-on collision, but with a soft, low taste. On the body of the killer whale, hundreds of dents appeared in a moment. These marks suddenly took shape and then slowly returned to normal. After a while, the round and chubby killer whale was completely restored. Ho Yun finally gave up and stood in the same place. The golden giant stick, which had never left his hand, was also let go by Ho Yun at this moment and fell to the ground. The original high-spirited master Ho Yun, at the moment, was completely disheartened. His face was expressionless, as if he had lost all his vitality. Although everyone could not see the sweat on Ho Yun's face in the water, everyone could imagine his mood. If an expert's specialty, which he was most proud of, was broken by someone standing still, no matter who it was, they would be equally disappointed. Neither the old tree demon nor Shi Kuei had any plans to do it again. Even Ho Yun had such a result. Even if the two of them went up, they might not have much of an effect. Needless to say, Shi Kuei's cultivation was far worse than the old tree demon. Although the difference was not much, the old tree demon had one thing that Ho Yun could not compare with. He was many times more cautious than Ho Yun, and at the same time, he was also many times calmer than Ho Yun. He could see the facts clearly and judge the strength of his opponent and himself. The killer whale looked chubby and did not have any lethality. For the time being, no one could tell the killer whale's cultivation level. However, Old Tree Demon could conclude that the killer whale's cultivation level was definitely beyond the human immortal stage. It was at least a level 7 or 8 stage Earth Immortal or even higher. Perhaps it was even at the peak of level 10 stage Earth Immortal. The gap between the Earth Immortal and the human Immortal was far from comparable to the gap between the Deshang stage and the human Immortal. To be honest, Ho Yun's defeat was not undeserved. No one on Yang Chen's side made a move. Killer Whale didn't know why, but he didn't make a move either. He just stared with his round eyes and looked around. Old Ho, it's not shameful to be defeated by a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert. Yang Chen's voice finally rang out. It was as if he had been enlightened and entered Ho Yun's ears. Level 8 stage Heaven Immortal? Hearing Yang Chen's words, everyone present was shocked. This unassuming, chubby, and a little comical fellow was actually a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert? Ho Yun's eyes, which were almost unfocused, suddenly flashed with a bright light the moment he heard Yang Chen's voice. Level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert? If it was really an opponent of this level, then it was really not shameful to be defeated by him. Although Ho Yun usually had a condescending attitude, this fellow was still very respectful to the truly powerful experts. For example, Yang Chen had forcibly suppressed him in terms of strength. Ho Yun had never dared to bare his teeth in front of Yang Chen. Now this killer whale turned out to be a level 8 stage Heaven Immortal expert. There was a difference of 2 major realms. No wonder his big stick and great strength had no effect at all. As soon as he realized that his failure was a matter of course, Ho Yun immediately regained his vigor. With a hook of his toes, the big stick that he had just let go of was picked up in his left hand. He then stretched out his right hand and gave Killer Whale a big thumbs up. A level heaven Immortal expert. No wonder everyone could not really see Killer Whale's strength. It turned out that he had already exceeded the limit of everyone's perception. Old Tree Demon and Shi Kuei had the urge to collapse at the thought that they had actually attacked a level 8 stage heaven Immortal expert. Fortunately, Killer Whale was behaving very strangely at the moment. He stayed where he was and did not move at all. Seeing Ho Yun give him a thumbs up, he also returned to his original size of 3 feet. He widened his big round eyes and looked at Ho Yun curiously. "Senior, this junior has a suitable cultivation method for you. Senior can refer to it." Since Yang Chen had already spoken, he naturally had already taken care of everything. At this moment, was there a more suitable way of communication than the beast controlling secret art? The direct communication of divine sense made Killer Whale startled, and then his body turned to Yang Chen's side. Feeling that Yang Chen had no malice, he nodded, and a voice sounded in Yang Chen's mind. "What cultivation method?" "Transformation secret art." Yang Chen passed the answer along with the transformation secret art. It can allow Senior to change his body shape. Before everyone could react, the communication between Yang Chen and Killer Whale had been completed. In the blink of an eye, the 3-foot-long Killer Whale turned into a round fat man standing in place. A level Immortal expert was indeed a level Immortal expert. Back then, Shi Kuei and Xiesha cultivated for at least a year. Even the old Tree Demon took more than a month to master the transformation secret art. Killer Whale had mastered it in just a moment. Interesting. Killer Whale looked down at the changes in his body, raised his hands and feet and played very happily. At the same time, he also spoke. After adapting for a while, he looked up at Yang Chen and asked, "Who are you? Where did you come from? What are you doing?" "This junior is Yang Chen of Chunyang Palace. These 2 are my wife, and these are the elders of this junior's sect." After Yang Chen cupped his hands and saluted, he began to introduce himself and everyone. "This junior and others found the underwater mansion outside, so we came in to find out what was going on and happened to meet Senior. Please forgive us for our rudeness, Senior." "You came from outside?" Fat Killer Whale looked very curious. He stared at the crowd and then pointed to Ho Yun and said, "Your strength is not small. Unfortunately, I still can't beat you." Ho Yun curled his lips. Even if he was already convinced in his heart, he did not call him Senior. Chapter 1553. "Hey, in terms of strength, I'm not your opponent." The fat Killer Whale shook his head and gave Ho Yun a thumbs up. "You're not bad." Ho Yun's eyes flashed again, and he asked with joy, "You can't beat me in terms of strength?" Although he knew that the fat Killer Whale was a Sky Immortal Master and it was normal to lose, Ho Yun was still quite happy to hear the fat Killer Whale admit that he was not as strong as him. "But your body is not as strong as mine." The fat Killer Whale admitted Ho Yun's question with his eyes, then he stuck out his belly and said proudly. Everyone saw a pile of fat cushioning the power of Ho Yun's big stick, and then slowly bouncing back. Not only Ho Yun, everyone else also nodded. This was a fact. The fat on his body was definitely the Killer Whale Senior's. "Since Senior is so powerful, why didn't you fight at the beginning and ran?" Ho Yun was puzzled and asked curiously. This question was also what everyone else wanted to know. Everyone had the same doubt. At this moment, Ho Yun asked the question on behalf of everyone. Everyone stared at the fat Killer Whale, waiting for him to return. "I've never fought with others. I was afraid of being beaten by you, so I ran when I saw you." The Killer Whale Senior was like a child who had never seen the outside world and grew up in a closed environment. He said very honestly, "You are the first batch I've seen. So that was the case. Everyone understood. This terrifying fatty had been living in this underwater mansion and had never fought with others, so naturally he didn't know how to judge the opponent's realm. It was funny to think about it. A level 8 Sky Immortal Master was scared by a few human Immortal level kids and ran away. Who knew how many people would say that it was nonsense? All the unreasonable things before had an explanation. Because this guy was a level 8 Sky Immortal, especially a water race, he was very fast in the water. It was normal that people couldn't see his shadow. After taking a few attacks from Ho Yun and the others, he came out to fight. Finally, he stood still and took Ho Yun's full attack. This was also because he had a comprehensive understanding of his and his opponent's strength. Of course, his mind was simple. He didn't think about what kind of psychological trauma Ho Yun would have if he took Ho Yun's attack like this. The pitiful Ho Yun had been inexplicably dealt a blow and had only just recovered from it. The old tree demon and Shi Kuei were glad that they had acted late. Otherwise, they would have followed in Ho Yun's footstep. I've never been out. Do you think I'm powerful outside? The fat killer whale still looked like a curious baby and asked very seriously. This question made everyone speechless for a while. Killer whale's nerves must be big to a certain extent. Otherwise, how could he not notice Ho Yun's depressed expression just now? If an 8th stage heaven immortal was not considered powerful, then what was considered powerful in the spiritual realm? Do I really have to mobilize the grand supreme mystic immortal experts of each sect? Very powerful. Yang Chen did not have such a reaction. He just gave Killer Whale a simple affirmative answer. Killer Whale immediately became complacent. As soon as he heard that he was also very powerful outside, he felt very happy. Her innocent look made everyone blush with shame. However, up until now, everyone was actually sweating profusely in their hearts. Although Killer Whale was smiling and talking to everyone now, this kind of simple-minded person was even more difficult to deal with. If he was annoyed, no one would be able to leave alive with so many people present. Because of this, almost no one spoke, and only Yang Chen came out to deal with it. It seemed that Yang Chen had a well-thought-out plan, and it was estimated that he already had a way to deal with it. What's fun outside? After Killer Whale Fatty was proud, he immediately began to ask again. There's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of delicious food. Yang Chen replied quickly. It seemed to be a casual sentence, but it immediately attracted the attention of Killer Whale Fatty. Delicious food? What kind of delicious food? A lot, something like this. Yang Chen, of course, answered the question with a purpose. Seeing that Fatty really took the bait, he immediately took advantage of the situation and threw out the corpse of a human immortal-level demon beast hundreds of meters long from the merit ring. This human immortal-level demon beast's corpse was actually the corpse of a kind of beast on the demon continent. At that time, the corpses of the beasts hunted by Gao Yu and the other women were handed over to Yang Chen. After the demonic qi on the corpse was completely purified by Yang Chen, it became like this. As soon as the corpse was thrown out, Fatty Whale stared at it and observed it carefully. Obviously, he had never seen this kind of beast before. After circling the corpse a few times, his figure suddenly changed, returning to the original appearance of Killer Whale again, but his figure was a little bigger. It looked like it was thousands of meters long. Facing the corpse of the demon beast, he opened his mouth, and the corpse hundreds of meters long was swallowed by him. After a crunching sound of chewing, Killer Whale turned into a fat man again, smacking his mouth as if he was savoring the aftertaste. After a while, he said, "The taste is a bit special, but it's not delicious, it's just a little supplement." Everyone looked at it for a while. Although Shi Kuei and Xie Sha had devoured the corpses of other demon beasts, they had never seen a whale like Killer Whale. Everyone didn't understand what Yang Chen was doing with this posture. Was it to make Killer Whale addicted to it? I haven't added any seasoning, and I haven't cooked it. Of course, it's not delicious. Yang Chen looked speechless and replied helplessly, If you want to eat real delicious food, you can't be impatient, wait slowly. It seems that delicious food is the hobby of Killer Whale. Listening to Yang Chen, he said to wait slowly. He immediately turned into a good baby. Okay, I'll wait, you go get something delicious. Come on, sit over there. Yang Chen reached out his hand and led Killer Whale to the pavilion. The tables and chairs inside were ready-made, and the wine and dishes were also ready-made, just to let Killer Whale feel it. What is this? Looking at the exquisite dishes, Killer Whale asked curiously. As he asked, his nose twitched. He had already smelled the appetizer. Without waiting for Yang Chen to answer, the little fat hand had grabbed a plate and poured it into his mouth. This time, this plate of dishes that everyone thought were not enough to fill the gap between Killer Whale's teeth was chewed hundreds of times in Killer Whale's mouth before Fat Killer Whale reluctantly swallowed it. His eyes had already looked at the other empty plate. The dishes that Gong Sunling carefully prepared for Yang Chen's meal finally played a jaw-dropping role, turning a master of Grade 8 Heavenly Immortal Realm directly into a salivating bug. Chapter 1554. If his physical strength was not as good as Yang Chen's, Killer Whale would not be moved. But to his horror, even if he used his whole body's spiritual power, he could not lift Yang Chen's arm, which looked several times thinner than Ho Yun's. Gong Sunling and Gao Yu came up and took away all the half-eaten dishes on the table. It was absolutely rude to entertain guests with cold leftovers. Yang Chen would not make such a mistake. Although letting Gao Yu and Gong Sunling do it seems to be a little contempt for the two women, it will not really lose their face to entertain a master of the 8th grade of Heavenly Immortal. As soon as the Jade Dragon wine entered his mouth, Killer Whale was directly conquered by this unique mellow taste. It was the first time in his life that he had tasted such a taste. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as if his whole body was soaked in warm water, and it was mixed with a wonderful feeling as if he was deep in the clouds, which was unforgettable. After Yang Chen poured everyone a cup of specially prepared Jade Dragon wine, Killer Whale became interested again and smelled the unique fragrance. This time, instead of swallowing it in one gulp, he asked excitedly, "What is this? It tastes so strange and fragrant?" "Good stuff." After taking a sip, Fat Killer Whale praised it and then followed Ho Yun's example and poured the rest of the wine into his mouth. Plates of delicacies were served by Gao Yu in turn. Fat Killer Whale had the heart to pick it up and swallow it in one gulp, but looking at the appearance of Yang Chen and Ho Yun, he restrained his impulse and clumsily imitated Yang Chen, holding 2 chopsticks made of unknown precious metal, and learned to pick up food. Now Killer Whale thinks about it, what he has eaten before is simply a pile of garbage. Where has there been such delicious food? Yang Chen is right, good things need seasoning and good cooking. Fat Killer Whale has now begun to think about how to keep Gong Sunling by his side and make such delicious food for himself at any time. After a few dishes, Killer Whale's fat tongue was almost bitten off by himself. The only regret was that the amount of food on the plate was too small. It became empty after only a few bites. It was really disappointing. Fortunately, the dishes were still being served, so there was still enough to eat. Gong Sunling's hands and feet were very fast, and the delicacies were soon ready. Gong Sunling had always considered Yang Chen's appetite, so she always carried a large amount of well-preserved ingredients with her. At this time, in order to completely subdue the Fat Killer Whale, she used all her skills. Anyway, her husband was going to eat, so Gong Sunling of course used the best skills. Killer Whale has seen the old tree demon's slow drinking, and he has also seen Ho Yun's direct pouring into his throat. After secretly comparing it in his heart, he felt that the old tree demon's appearance was more enjoyable. After thinking for a while, he imitated the old tree demon and took a sip. Then, he closed his eyes to feel it. This was a completely different kind of feeling. A line of fire went from his mouth to his stomach, and then spread to his whole body. In just a moment, his whole body seemed to be ignited, and the feeling of excitement made people want to sing loudly. This is the Jade Dragon wine carefully brewed by another wife of this younger generation junior. Senior, please taste it. Yang Chen reached out and asked Killer Whale to pick up the glass. The others looked at Yang Chen and secretly pinched a sweat. Daring to anger an 8th grade Heaven Immortal master, it was estimated that among the people present, only Ho Yun dared to do so without knowing the inside story? If he really knew that the other party had the strength of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm, Ho Yun would not be a fool. When Killer Whale's little fat hand reached the second plate, Yang Chen's hand also arrived at the same time and gently pressed his palm. Why? Killer Whale's brain was simple. He immediately showed an angry look on his face and looked at Yang Chen fiercely. Ho Yun, the old tree demon, Shi Kuei and Xie Sha also sat down in a circle under Yang Chen's gesture, and the 6 of them formed a table. However, the 4 demons seemed to be a little reserved, which was very different from the usual stinginess they used to have. Of course, this was not surprising. The pressure brought by an expert of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm was not a little bit. Beginners would always show some funny scenes, but none of the people present laughed. A Heaven Immortal realm expert was indeed a Heaven Immortal realm expert. His control of his body was absolutely extraordinary. Finally, after losing the 3rd pair of chopsticks, he learned to use these 2 special weapons. This question from the mouth of an expert of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal realm made people speechless. However, looking at this guy's barbaric appearance of swallowing the corpse of a species beast, it seemed that he had never used cutlery before. It was normal that he did not know the concept. Yes, these are the cutlery. Yang Chen let go of his hand and motioned for Killer Whale to sit down. Then, he gave Gong Sunling a look. So easy? No way? Seeing the fat Killer Whale turn into a drunkard, the old tree demon could not believe his eyes. I don't know why. Yang Chen shook his head and said to Killer Whale with a smile, You need to use cutlery to eat. You can't use your hands to eat. It seems very uncultured. Seeing the delicious food that he had never eaten before being taken away in front of him, fat Killer Whale's eyes stared straight at the plates. He was extremely resentful, as if he was going to get up and snatch the food back in the next moment. Tasting delicacies after having good wine felt different. Fat Killer Whale only felt that all the delicacies that he could taste in his life had been fulfilled with this meal, and there were no more regrets. It was said to be gentle because in everyone's eyes, Yang Chen's movements were very gentle and did not seem to be using any force at all. But to Fat Killer Whale, it was as if a mountain was pressing down on his arm. No matter how hard he tried, he could not lift his arm. There's no hurry. My wife's cooking skills are not bad. Just in time for Senior to taste it. Yang Chen found it funny, but his face was still very formal. This explanation finally made Fatty, who was anxiously waiting, retract his gaze from the plates. Killer Whale's face cleared up a little and he pointed to the bowls, chopsticks, cups, and so on the table suspiciously and asked, What is tableware? Is it those things? Fat Killer Whale was a simple man. Coupled with Ho Yun's frequent persuasion to drink, he also let go of his throat. The 2 of them drank 1 glass after another, then they drank 1 bowl after another, and finally, they drank 1 jar after another. After drinking a few jars in a row, both of them turned into a pool of mud and drilled under the table. Ho Yun lost to Killer Whale, who had a huge gap in cultivation, and he was no longer so disappointed. Now, seeing that Killer Whale was a little addicted to drinking, he also let go of his arrogance and competed with Killer Whale in drinking. He can't fight, can't he drink? Chapter 1555. A master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal was put down just like that, without the slightest resistance in front of everyone. No matter how you think about it, it was incredible. If they had known this earlier, they wouldn't have fought at the beginning. They could have come up to drink, and they wouldn't have been so embarrassed at the beginning. How could it be so easy? Yang Chen breathed a sigh of relief and then sighed. This is just the beginning, there will be trouble later. Fatty Killer Whale seemed to have a simple character, but if he really thought that he could be bought with such a little food and wine, then he would think that the master of the Heaven Immortal was too simple. This underwater mansion still needed Fatty Killer Whale's help to control it, so he couldn't be touched at this time, so he could only be subdued. But how could it be so easy to subdue a monster? Not to mention, Shikue, Xiesha, old tree demon Ho Yun, who didn't spend a lot of effort by Yang Chun and promised countless benefits before they succeeded. Especially Ho Yun, when he joined Chunyang Palace. His cultivation was higher than everyone else's. If it weren't for Yang Chen's benefit of the yellow turban strongman body refining technique, and his own strength that could firmly suppress Ho Yun, how could this guy be so obedient now? The same was true for Fatty Killer Whale in front of him. His simple mind meant that he wouldn't have so many twists and turns, which was a good thing. But once there was something he was dissatisfied with, he would definitely vent his anger immediately. The anger of a master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal, not to mention the current Chunyang Palace, even those first-class sect in the spiritual world couldn't say that they could easily take it. It was the first time for Fatty to drink, and he was a little drunk. Ho Yun had long been used to it, and it didn't take long for him to wake up. The first thing Ho Yun did after waking up was to find Yang Chen to settle accounts. Yang Chen, did you already know the result, so you deliberately made fun of me? Ho Yun stood in front of Yang Chen and almost grabbed Yang Chen's collar and scolded him. Fortunately, this guy knew that he was no match for Yang Chen in terms of strength, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. However, Ho Yun's questioning of Yang Chen was also what the old tree demon wanted to ask. At the beginning, Yang Chen also asked everyone not to hurt the Fat Killer Whale, which was simply a blatant misdirection. If not for that, they wouldn't have been so arrogant, and Ho Yun wouldn't have been beaten so miserably. Old Ho, don't you think that after destroying the Equal Gate sect, you're looking down on everyone in the world? In the face of Ho Yun's furious questioning, Yang Chen didn't show the slightest bit of anger. In fact, not only Ho Yun, but the old tree demon Gui Shanyu was also included. When they attacked the Equal Gate sect, none of the human immortal stage Equal Gate sect disciples were a match for the two of them. This made them very proud. They always felt that in the human celestial stage they were invincible. Of course, a freak like Yang Chen was an exception. His wives and concubines were also freaks, and they couldn't be judged by common sense. This kind of arrogant attitude was also a great taboo in cultivation. Confidence was a good thing, but blind confidence was another matter. There were not many disciples in Chunyang Palace, and these people had a very close relationship with Yang Chen, so Yang Chen naturally had to think more about them. Listening to Yang Chen's words, Ho Yun also fell into deep thought, and the old tree demon, Shikue and Xie Sha next to him were the same. The Equal Gate sect, which had a 6th grade Earth Immortal Master, was destroyed by a dozen people in Chunyang Palace, and all of them were killed. When many people mentioned Chunyang Palace, they no longer had the kind of contempt in the past, which made Ho Yun feel a lot better. Now thinking about it carefully, as Yang Chen said, they were a little complacent. The blow of the Fat Killer Whale came at the right time, so that they could completely wake up to their position in the spiritual world. Ho Yun didn't have much reaction here, but there was another kind of temperament change in the old tree demon over there. Along with the change was the spiritual power fluctuation of the old tree demon. It seemed that in such a short time, the old tree demon's cultivation had improved a lot. The 4th grade human celestial, Yang Chen, was shocked. The old tree demon was indeed the old tree demon. After experiencing the change of his mentality, his temperament became more and more stable, and even his cultivation improved by a small realm. Stimulated by the change of the old tree demon, Ho Yun seemed to fall into a state of confusion. Standing in the same place, the expression on his face became arrogant, and the next moment it became very calm. It was simply two extremes, and even the spiritual power fluctuation on his body seemed to be a little chaotic. Bang! In the midst of everyone's surprise, Yang Chen punched Ho Yun's face and Ho Yun's whole body flew out. What are you thinking about? You are you, it is your nature to be presumptuous. Why do you want to be calm? Following Yang Chen's fist, there were Yang Chen's words. I'm teaching you a lesson to let you know the immensity of heaven and earth, not to let you change your nature for nothing. Cultivation is about following the will of heaven, not blindly suppressing one's nature. If you cultivate in this way, you will lose the meaning of cultivation. Ho Yun can cultivate to this realm. He has already understood this truth, but for a while, he was stimulated by the killer whale, and Yang Chen's punch just woke him up. Ha ha! I understand. Ho Yun, who had been sent flying, quickly returned to his side. He was still in the air, and he was already laughing wildly. Listening to the presumptuousness and freedom in his laughter, Yang Chen believed that he really understood. Ho Yun really understood, so in front of Yang Chen, in front of everyone, his huge body began to slowly become thin. Just like Yang Chen's body expanded and then shrank by half, Ho Yun also began to experience this process. Not long after, Ho Yun changed from a burly man to a well-proportioned, tall, and handsome man. The muscles on his body have shrunk a lot, but Ho Yun himself knows that his yellow turban strongman body refining technique has been promoted to a small realm, and there has been a qualitative change in pure strength. Shi Kuei and Xie Sha did not have such a good opportunity and could not break through on the spot, but they also understood Yang Chen's painstaking efforts, and their state of mind naturally changed. This time, it seems to be a happy situation for everyone. They found a spiritual vein of the fairy immortal level, and they also found a large underwater palace. The 4 monster race masters have all improved. So far, they have temporarily gained the friendship of a grade 8 fairy immortal master. Everything seems to be perfect. However, Yang Chen has begun to worry about what method he should use to make the fat killer whale fully recognize himself and Chunyang Palace. At present, the fat man has a pivotal role for the current Chunyang Palace. In any case, this matter must be solved perfectly. Chapter 1556. At any time, if he wanted to subdue someone, it was nothing more than a few words of kindness and power. Now the fat man was obviously obsessed with food and wine, which was easy to satisfy. But how to make the fat killer whale convinced and not lose his temper in the future? He needed to have the same ability to subdue him. Fight? Although Yang Chen asked himself how tough he was, he had never been so arrogant when facing an 8th grade heaven immortal expert as a 4th grade human immortal junior. Even with the golden bell, the great yin and yang 5 elements flying sword, the 3 purities secret art, the great yin and yang 5 elements secret art, and the yellow turban strongman body refining technique, he was not his opponent. At first, the fat killer whale just didn't know his own combat effectiveness and couldn't clearly judge the combat effectiveness of others. Once he went crazy and really wanted to use his killer move, the people present would not survive for more than a few rounds. This was by no means an alarmist. A master of the 8th grade of the Heaven Immortal had such strength. Perhaps on land, this guy was huge, and even if he had a high cultivation, he might not be able to catch up with the speed of everyone's escape. But the reality now was that everyone was in the underwater palace. Competing with a killer whale in the water was simply courting death. However, when he saw the fat man fighting with Ho Yun, he was still interested in his strength. Yang Chen thought that maybe he could compete with the fat man in this aspect. In the memory of his previous life, this guy seemed to be tempted by delicious food, and then became a super thug guard of a demon sect, and was given a powerful and safe underwater palace. In this life, since Yang Chen had already taken the Sea of Hatred, he naturally could not leave this superb item to others. The difference was that the demon sect in his previous life had a master of the Heaven Immortal level, who could suppress this guy. Now Chunyang Palace was just a few kittens. Not to mention a master of the Heaven Immortal level, Even an opponent with a slightly higher level of the Earth Immortal level would not dare to say that they could fight against them. But it was not Yang Chen's style to give up the Fat Man and the underwater palace. If it didn't work, he could only use the power of the Blood River and the Immortal beheading stage to completely suppress the Fat Man. However, in this way, the Fat Man was a bit forced to surrender. He was not necessarily loyal to Chunyang Palace. Moreover, if Yang Chen were to use the power of the Blood River and the Immortal slaying platform, the commotion would not be ordinary. When he was in the mortal world, Yang Chen once thought that he had completely absorbed the killing intent of the Immortal beheading platform. It was only when he refined the entrance of the Immortal beheading platform that he realized that he was still far from it. He hadn't even reached 1% of it. At that time, he was really a little arrogant. Using the river of blood alone might not be enough to subdue an 8th-tier heaven immortal expert, and it would only increase their hatred. Coupled with the power of the entrance to the immortal slaying platform, there was no telling if it would be damaged. That was not all. Once the aura of the immortal slaying platform erupted, the spiritual realm would definitely descend into chaos, and they would search for a peerless demon like him. At that point, a tiny underwater mansion and an 8th-tier heaven immortal fatty would be a loss that outweighed the gains. Just when others thought that Yang Chen had a well-thought-out plan and Yang Chen was racking his brains, the Fat Man finally woke up from his drunken state. As soon as he woke up, he yelled at Ho Yun, "What method did you use? How dare you give me a headache?" The headache after a hangover, and this guy thought that Ho Yun had done something. After Yang Chen stepped forward to explain, this guy tasted a little more wine under Ho Yun's instigation. The feeling of headache disappeared, but there was a unique aftertaste. That feeling made the Fat Man like it very much. "I haven't asked for the senior's name yet." When the Fat Man was completely sober and sat down at the table and began to wait for the wine and dishes to be served, Yang Chen asked politely. The fat killer whale had already realized the beauty of the Jade Dragon wine. Whether it was a light drink or a lofty drink, each had its own flavor. Now he had completely become a captive of the wine, and he didn't want to extricate himself from it. When he woke up, he had to continue, and everyone had to bite the bullet to accompany him. "I don't have a name, how do you call me?" The fat killer whale shook his head directly. He lived alone and never thought about the name. Listening to Yang Chen's question, he realized that there was a good name, and he remembered to ask everyone's identity. Yang Chen has already introduced himself, and others have also been introduced, but only as a senior of the sect. Now that everyone is a drinking friend, it is necessary to reintroduce them. Ho Yun, the old tree demon, Shi Kuei and Xie Sha said their names in turn. The names of Shi Kuei and Xie Sha made the Fat Man very interested. After he figured out that the two guys were just lazy and used the names of Viper and Sand Scorpion, he immediately made the same name for himself. "Then I will be called Jing Hu." Yang Chen has already expected this. Sometimes this guy's mind is simple. Jing Hu is Jing Hu. Anyway, it's just a name. People who practice don't care so much about it. After stuffing himself with food, this time, Jing Hu and Fatty Jing didn't get drunk again. After a hangover, he had experience and knew how to use spiritual power to dispel the alcohol at the appropriate time. Because of this, he was able to enjoy Gong Suanling's food fully sober. This time, he almost swallowed his tongue again. "It's delicious." After eating, Fatty Jing was not vague at all. He gave a thumbs up to Gong Sunling, which he learned from Ho Yun at the beginning. However, after the praise, Fatty Jing immediately showed his true colors and said to Gong Sunling unceremoniously, "You will follow me in the future and cook delicious food for me every day." "No." Gong Sunling did not answer, but Yang Chen answered. What a joke, let Gong Sunling follow this guy to be a cook, dream on. Why not? In the eyes of Fatty Jing, since he was the best and he liked to eat delicious food, it was a matter of course to bring someone to cook for him. Why not? A Ling is my wife. Yang Chen still shook his head and replied very seriously, I cook now because I treat you as a guest. I can't follow you. Fatty Jing felt that what Yang Chen said made sense, but he didn't want to go back to his previous life. After eating Gong Suanling's food and drinking the Jade Dragon wine, he had lived a dog's life before, and he was even worse than a dog. He was a little reluctant to let Jing Hu give up. This is easy, let's fight. Ho Yun, who was next to him, wanted the world to be in chaos. He said in a provocative manner, whoever wins will listen to him. Good idea, let's do that. Fatty Jing suddenly felt like a confidant. He immediately nodded and said to Yang Chen, let's fight. Whoever wins will take it. How about it? Chapter 1557. Nothing much. Yang Chen glared at Ho Yun fiercely, knowing that this guy was still dissatisfied with Yang Chen's scheme before and wanted a little revenge. However, how could Yang Chen agree to this kind of thing? He shook his head directly. Then what do you say? Fatty Jing felt that after eating his food and drinking his wine, it seemed a bit unreasonable to bully others with his own strength, so he could only ask resentfully. Well, let's compete in strength. Yang Chen finally found the time to say his plan. Ho Yun didn't do anything good, but this topic was just right. If I win, you will join our Chunyang Palace. Naturally, there will be people who will serve you well. If you win, I will let a Ling entertain you once a year. How about it? That's fine too. Fatty Jing's thoughts were simple. After listening to Yang Chen's suggestion, he nodded immediately, but then immediately added, but I may not be better than you in terms of strength. I couldn't snatch the plate from you last time. Why don't you learn from old Ho and see if you can move me? If you can move me, then you win. If you can't move me, then you lose. Although Fatty Jing's brain was simple, he was not stupid at all. When he was suppressed by Yang Chen for the plate, he realized that Yang Chen's strength was amazing. However, he only felt that Yang Chen must be about the same as Ho Yun because the two of them were about the same size now. Since Ho Yun couldn't move him, Yang Chen certainly couldn't either. This suggestion was exactly what Yang Chen wanted. Ho Yun was just a yellow-turbaned strongman with an arcane power of overturning river. Not long ago, he reached the advanced stage because of Yang Chen's guidance, while Yang Chen had already reached the peak of overturning sea strength when he ascended. He was only one step away from reaching the realm of earth strength. Compared to Ho Yun, he was a whole realm higher, so it was not impossible for him to move Jing Hu. There were many yellow-turbaned strongmen in the immortal world who had only reached the realm of overturning sea strength and could already compete with golden immortal masters with brute force. Even if Yang Chen had not experienced the baptism of heaven's retribution, and the strength of his body was not comparable to that of Xian immortal and golden immortal masters, he was not bad in terms of pure strength. In fact, it might even surpass them. Yang Chen and Jing Hu stood facing each other in the vast space of the underwater mansion. Jing Hu still maintained the form of a fatty, not returning to his original appearance. Perhaps in his heart, as long as he could withstand Yang Chen's strength, no matter how strong Yang Chen was, in a situation where his realm was inferior to Ho Yun's, he could at most have the strength of Ho Yun's attack, right? Because it was purely a contest of strength, Yang Chen did not intend to use the great yin-yang five elements flying sword. Even Ho Yun's offer to lend him the golden rod was rejected by Yang Chen. A good opponent was hard to come by, and an 8th-tier heaven immortal target was even harder to come by. Yang Chen was still thinking of fighting with his bare fist. Peng! Under Jing Hu's signal, Yang Chen walked up and unceremoniously punched Jing Hu's plump belly. This was the part of Jing Hu's body with the most fat, and it was also the part where he was least afraid of brute force attack. The sound was as deep as when Ho Yun attacked Jing Hu. The moment his fist touched Jing Hu's fat, Yang Chen truly felt the elasticity of Jing Hu's body. This method of swallowing almost all power and then slowly reducing the force through deformation could be said to be Jing Hu's most unique method of dealing with brute force attack. Jing, who originally thought that Yang Chen's fist would softly sink in like Ho Yun's rod, and then be bounced off, leaving him unharmed. However, the power carried by Yang Chen's fist gave Jing Hu a big fright. Similarly sinking into the pit of fat, similarly having the force reduced by the fat deformation, but the strength of Yang Chen's fist was so great that even though the fat had deformed to its limit, it still could not completely reduce the force. There was still a part of the force that directly penetrated the fat and heavily bombarded Jing Hu's internal organs. Standing in the same place, Jing Hu made a slightly surprised muffled sound, and his powerful spiritual power quickly offset the force that went straight into his internal organs. Even so, the place where he was hit by Yang Chen's fist still had some faint pain. Although it was not enough to injure him, the feeling of the fist hitting him was not good. Ho Yun's eyes widened on the side, for fear of missing a little. Yang Chen's body refining technique realm was higher than his, Ho Yun was clear. This was not a good time to see what the higher realm of body refining technique looked like. Your punch is more than 10 times heavier than old Ho's. Those who had received the attacks of the two exclaimed, and were most qualified to judge the strength of the two. Yang Chen's punch made Jing Hu very surprised. Looking at Yang Chen's figure, his cultivation base was also slightly low, but the strength of this punch almost made him lose his composure. Fortunately, Jing Hu, who endured the pain, could still stand in the same place, and was not sent flying by the punch. Otherwise, he would have lost in the first punch. Yang Chen's first punch was just a test, and the next was the real attack. Facing Jing Hu, Yang Chen's fist seemed to turn into a large canopy, carrying hundreds of fist shadows, and slammed into Jing Hu's fat. At this moment, Jing Hu was not as relaxed as he was at the beginning. His face was serious, and his spiritual power flowed all over his body, completely protecting his whole body. Just after this step, Yang Chen's fist had already reached his body. A series of banging sounds were endless, and countless pits appeared on Jing Hu's body. Each pit was the result of Yang Chen's fist attack. Just because Yang Chen's attack speed was too fast, the first pit had not had time to bounce, and the second pit had already appeared. Such a shocking scene appeared one after another. Jing Hu's body was almost stretched to the extreme, and all the spiritual power in his body was resisting the power that rushed straight into his internal organs, bombarding from all directions. He had always been proud of his almost invulnerable fat, but at this moment there was a burst of pain. It was completely the feeling of being forcibly blasted out by Yang Chen. However, an expert of the 8th grade of the Sky Immortal Realm was an expert of the 8th grade of the Sky Immortal Realm. Even if he did not use a magic treasure to protect himself, he only relied on his body and spiritual power to defend himself, and he was able to withstand the series of bombardment from Yang Chen. However, even with Jing Hu's cultivation base, he could no longer maintain a human body at this moment. He completely restored his original appearance of a killer whale, and his body had also expanded a lot, becoming several feet in circumference, no longer just 3 feet. Yang Chen also secretly complained in his heart. Jing Hu, this fatty, really lived up to his reputation. His fat body could even withstand the power of the peak of the sea pouring strength. Although he had not been baptized by the heavenly tribulation, power would not lie. Every one of his attacks was firmly received by Jing Hu. Could it be that his strength was really helpless against this fatty? Chapter 1558. Fatty Jing's current state was completely in line with the characteristics of using softness to overcome hardness. A body of soft fat, wrapped in extremely tough skin, was simply a natural shield. It was more useful than any protective magic weapon to deal with this kind of strong attack. On the contrary, many seemingly advanced protective magic weapons would be shattered by Yang Chen's punch when fighting hard. It was because he only knew how to make himself into a hard shell, but he forgot to add a buffer. Without a buffer, no matter how strong it was, there would always be a stronger attack that could break it. Obviously, this was already a deep application of strength. Yang Chun suddenly realized after hundreds of attacks. If he insisted on using the strongest strength and did not understand the balance of hardness and softness, he would eventually become a bigger frog at the bottom of a well like those guys who had their magic weapons crushed by him before. Ho Yun did not understand this principle, so his life-bound magic weapon was an incomparably hard big stick. Similarly, Yang Chun himself only realized what he was missing now. Even if his realm was higher than Ho Yun, it did not seem to be much better. Since hardness couldn't break through Fatty Jing's fat, then he had to change his method. Yang Chun recalled his experience as a great principal golden immortal and tried hard to recall the fighting methods of those super powerful guys. While fighting, he pondered how he should deal with the situation in front of him. Lifting something heavy as if it were light was another level of realm, higher than Ho Yun's current realm. Yang Chun could already reach it, but he was still helpless in the face of Fatty Jing's fat. How to make Fatty Jing's fat not work? In the process of waving his fists, Yang Chun could not completely attack Fatty Jing's body with his strength. Now that everyone was in the underwater mansion, no matter how he punched, there would always be a part of his strength consumed in breaking through the water. To put it bluntly, this water was basically the same nature as Fatty Jing's fat, but it was not as strong as Fatty Jing's fat. Water. Yang Chen's mind keenly grasped this concept. Why was strength always consumed quickly in the water? Why would the ball always bounce when hit into the water? If the ball was pressed into the water, it would not bounce so quickly. The reason why the fat would bounce back was because the fat would always bounce back after being pressed to the limit. But what if it was just a slow press? As soon as he thought of this, Yang Chen's mind lit up. His fist that was swinging towards Fatty Jing was no longer as fast as before. It began to slow down. Yang Chen's actions puzzled everyone. Why did he suddenly move in slow motion when he was about to attack? Fatty Jing didn't seem to care at all. He didn't even care about that kind of fast attack, so why would he care about a slow fist? He watched as the fist touched his own body and slowly sank into his own fat, until it was pressed to the limit. Only at this point did Fatty Jing understand something, but it was too late to react at this time. At this time, Yang Chun suddenly exerted his strength. The power of the Peak River overturning strength passed through the fat that had been compressed to the extreme and directly acted on the inside of Fatty Jing's body. There was no sound, but Fatty Jing seemed to be hit by a huge hammer, and his whole body flew up. No matter how he stabilized it with his spiritual power, it was useless. After walking through the water for dozens of feet, under the effect of his own cultivation base and the surrounding water, he offset Yang Chen's huge force and hovered in the water. How is this possible? What couldn't be done with a quick punch was actually pushed so far by such a simple and slow movement. Everyone who saw this scene had an expression as if they had seen a ghost. Then, everyone immediately began to think about what happened. Again, Yang Chun had just touched the edge. How could he stop now? He had already forgotten the bet just now and immediately shouted for Fatty Jing to continue. Where could he find an 8th grade Sky Immortal sparring partner? Fatty Jing also had a look of disbelief. If his body hadn't already flown out, he wouldn't have believed that he would be sent flying by Yang Chen's slow punch. When Yang Chun called out, Fatty Jing was also unconvinced and immediately returned to his original form. He finally knew how to restrain himself and turned into a giant killer whale that was hundreds of feet long. The previous blow was obviously an accident. If he hadn't turned into a human form, causing his fat to be too thin, he wouldn't have suffered that loss. This time, no matter how long Yang Chen's fist was, plus Yang Chen's arm, his body couldn't be thicker than Jing Hu's fat. Yang Chun couldn't compress Jing Hu's fat to the limit even if he stood on his tiptoes. Jing Hu wanted to see if Yang Chun still had a way to break through his current state. Yang Chen realized a lot of things from the punch just now, the core of which was the application of soft force. At this moment, facing Jing Hu's body, he was not afraid. His fist turned into a palm and slowly slapped on Jing Hu's skin. It was completely different from Yang Chen's previous firm and fierce force. A soft force that seemed to be able to penetrate all obstacles penetrated Jing Hu's thick layer of fat and once again acted on his body. The firm and fierce force could bring a moment of pain to Jing Hu, but it would pass after enduring for a while. It wasn't a big deal. However, this soft force was very uncomfortable. The pain wasn't as intense as before, but the duration was nearly twice as long. It was very uncomfortable. It was just 1 or 2 hits, but Yang Chen was completely unable to use this force skillfully. It just so happened that there was a live target in front of him that wouldn't be injured at all. How could Yang Chen be polite? His hands seemed to have turned into butterflies, fluttering in all directions and slapping on Jing Hu's body. Anyway, Jing Hu's body was so huge, so he wasn't afraid of the wrong position. He just had to slap it. Every slap made Yang Chen have a new kind of understanding, which made him so addicted. More importantly, this kind of slightly slow and gentle attack saved a lot of energy compared to the kind of firm and fierce attack. No wonder people said that the firm could not last long. The opposite of the firm could not last long was the soft could not defend. Yang Chen didn't know how many times he had heard these words in the mortal world, but he had never had such an understanding. Even in his previous life, in his 10,000 years of memory, even when he reached the level of Almighty Immortal, he always felt that absolute power could occupy the absolute upper hand. He never thought that there would be such a soft attack method. It was no wonder that he was stuck in the Almighty Immortal realm for 10,000 years, and his cultivation was forcibly raised by others. Not to mention anything else, just his comprehension of power was not up to standard, so how could he become a true expert? Now, under the pressure of this fatty, he really began to realize this kind of power. Chapter 1559. Some of the things that he had ignored before, at this moment, seemed to have flooded into his mind. Softness, vibration, abrupt force, all kinds of methods were used by Yang Chen's hands. Regardless of what part of Jing Hu was in front of him, he just slapped it to the face. The trembling of Jing Hu's fat was no longer as regular as it was at the beginning. Jing Hu's chubby round face also seemed to have a trace of pain. It was only because he was competing with Yang Chen that he stayed in place, and was not sent flying by Yang Chen. Yang Chen also consciously reduced his power. If the power of the peak of overturning the sea strength really bombarded a few times, let alone a celestial immortal, even a profound immortal or golden immortal would not necessarily be able to completely bear it. This kind of opportunity to practice was rare, and Yang Chen did not want Jing Hu to be interrupted because of pain. The more he hit, the smoother his hands became, and the more skilled he became in the application of various kinds of power. On Yang Chen's face, the smile also grew wider. The strange thing was, the speed of Yang Chen's attacks slowly became faster and faster, and after a while, he returned to the original storm-like attack frequency. But, although the speed was fast, the way of the attack was completely different. After thousands of palms, Yang Chen did not care what kind of hand gesture he used, fist or palm. Anyway, as long as the angle was suitable, it was comfortable. Jing Hu's feeling was completely different. Although he was still unscathed under this kind of attack, every time Yang Chen hit him, it always brought him a little bit of pain. Under the continuous attacks, Jing Hu's fat face almost drooped to the ground. The more Yang Chen hit, the more excited he became, and the power in his hands finally began to slowly increase. Unknowingly, Yang Chen had begun to fix a certain area to attack. Poor Jing Hu had to bear the pain brought by Yang Chen's abnormal power and abnormal skills, and almost wanted to give up. Everyone just looked at Yang Chen's constant attacks, but no one noticed that the body of the killer whale, which was 100 feet in size, was slowly retreating with Yang Chen's blows. Perhaps it was because everyone was in the water, and Jing Hu's posture was still the same, so he didn't realize that his body was retreating. But now the body of the killer whale has retreated no less than 100 feet, and it is still slowly retreating. The uncomfortable feeling in Jing Hu's body finally turned into pain. If this continued, if Yang Chen increased his strength, Jing Hu would most likely be injured. Stop! Fatty Jing Hu took the initiative to shout for them to stop. Then, his body quickly retreated for a while before transforming back into Fatty's appearance. After standing still, Fatty Jing realized that the place where Yang Chen was standing was already hundreds of feet forward. You win! There was one good thing about Fatty Jing's simple-mindedness, and that was that he would never go back on his word. If he won, then he won. If he lost, then he lost. He had already been repelled by Yang Chen's tens of thousands of attacks, so he had lost the previous agreement. It's a pity that I can't let Gong Sunling cook for me all the time, but it's not bad to have someone else cook for me. Yang Chen was immersed in a new way of using power, and he was so excited that he could hardly control himself. Hearing the voice of Fatty Jing, Yang Chen stopped subconsciously. But the excitement in his mind was not over yet. He also felt that this was a rare opportunity. He took out a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill and threw it into his mouth. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground on the spot and began to comprehend quietly. What's that delicious? Watching Yang Chen eat a pill with 5 dragon patterns, Fatty Jing immediately became curious and asked. Afraid that Fatty Jing would not be obedient at this time and disturb Yang Chen, Gao Yu took the initiative to take out a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill, and then respectfully handed it to Jing Hu and explained, "It's this 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill. After taking it, it can help you think and concentrate, which is good for cultivation." When Gao Yu spoke, Jing Hu had already thrown the questioning inner heart pill into his mouth, and soon the effect began to take effect. Jing Hu turned around a few times in the same place, shaking his head frantically, as if he didn't know what to do. After a while, Jing Hu's eyes lit up, and he once again turned into a 3-foot-long killer whale. He quickly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, and no one knew where he went. Perhaps Jing Hu was not used to Yang Chen's direct cross-legged retreat, but everyone has their own way and it can't be forced. Jing Hu also used his own way to digest the effect of the 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill. Yang Chen was in retreat, and the others did not leave, waiting not far from Yang Chen. The old tree demon and Ho Yun have both improved, and they just took the opportunity to comprehend. Shi Kuei, Xie Sha and Gao Yu Gong Sunling were left to protect the 3. This sat for a few months. Yang Chen didn't know how many scenes had passed through in his mind. Finally, after thoroughly comprehending what he had gained this time, he opened his eyes. As soon as he woke up, Yang Chen realized that his body had changed slightly. The yellow turban strongman body refining technique, which had been trapped in the peak sea strength realm, finally had a breakthrough. He really got rid of the shackles of the sea strength realm and entered the realm that countless Xian Immortal and Golden Immortal Yellow Turban strongman dreamed of. Ha 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 ha! Yang Chen laughed and stood up. He didn't wait for Gao Yu Gong Sunling, who had been waiting anxiously, to speak and directly made a wait gesture. The 2 women looked at Yang Chen in amazement and didn't know what he was going to do. Ho Yun and the old tree demon had already come out, and together with Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, they also looked at Yang Chen in confusion and watched his movements. Under the gaze of everyone, Yang Chen's arm turned over and shook outward. An irresistible invisible wave surged out of thin air from Yang Chen's arm and spread throughout the underwater mansion in a moment. Boom! All the water in the entire underwater mansion was shaken by Yang Chen's arm and turned into a monstrous wave. Even if everyone was at the bottom of the water, they could still feel the power of the wave. Their bodies couldn't help but move a few steps with the waves before they stood still. Is this the real sea strength realm? Ho Yun's eyes shone brightly and he immediately asked in surprise after standing still. Ho Yun always thought that the sea strength realm was just a description of the realm and it was not necessarily possible to really achieve it. However, the shock of Yang Chen's lifting of the heavy, as if it was light, made him really feel the movement of the sea strength realm. Ho Yun couldn't help but be excited. Yang Chen's present was Ho Yun's future. They were all cultivating the yellow turban strongman body refining technique. When he thought that he could do this in the future, Ho Yun couldn't help but be excited. When Ho Yun said this, the others also had some idea. Just now, wasn't it like an overturning of the rivers and seas? Yang Chen did not directly answer Ho Yun's question, but under the gaze of everyone, he slowly lifted his foot and then seemingly floated down. Chapter 1560. Everyone watched as Yang Chen's feet touched the ground, and then everyone felt an invincible force from Yang Chen's feet began to spread to the surroundings. The entire underwater palace began to shake violently, and the rumbling sound began to sound from under Yang Chen's feet and spread throughout the entire underwater palace. The violent shaking lasted for a full half an incense stick of time, and everyone had to steady their horse stance, resisting the impact of this irregular movement that even the ground began to move up and down. After half an incense stick of time, the underwater palace's ground returned to calm, and then the underwater palace's shaking slowly stopped. This is the earth-penetrating strength? Ho Yun's eyes were already as big as a copper bell. The realm that he didn't even dare to think about before appeared in front of him. It appeared in Yang Chen's body. Maybe in the future it would appear in his body. Thinking of that possibility, Ho Yun, who had always been arrogant, was slightly trembling with excitement. Yes, the real earth-penetrating strength and sea-overturning strength. Yang Chen finally answered. His heart was also filled with an indescribable joy. He originally thought that at least when he broke through the human immortal tribulation, it was possible to break through, but he didn't expect to get inspiration from Fatty Jing, comprehend the truth of the combination of hardness and softness, and truly entered the realm of earth-penetrating strength. These realms of the yellow turban strongman body refining technique, in the immortal world, not many people could fully achieve it. More than 99% of the yellow turban strongman reached the limit of sea-overturning strength, and it was impossible to break through again. The two realms of earth-penetrating strength and sky-raising strength were once regarded as legends. At least Yang Chen had never seen these two realms of yellow turban strongman. Now that Yang Chen himself had reached the realm of earth-penetrating strength, he realized how superficial his understanding of strength was in the past. However, it was not too late to understand now. It was definitely 100 million times better than being kept in the dark for a lifetime. Now if he faced Jing Hu again, Yang Chen was sure that he could send Jing Hu flying with a punch, and there was a great possibility that Jing Hu would be injured. Of course, the prerequisite was that Jing Hu, a heavenly immortal expert, would stand still and allow him to attack. Otherwise, if he couldn't hit him, there wouldn't be any effect at all. Entering the Conch underwater residence was definitely one of the best decisions that Yang Chen had ever made. Otherwise, how could he have gotten the chance to unleash his strength so wantonly? What kind of opponent would allow him to attack without retaliating? However, up until now, Yang Chen had not seen Jing Hu's figure. Where did this fatty go? Where's Senior Jing? Yang Chen asked immediately after realizing this. Not waiting for Gao Yu to answer, Yang Chen's spiritual consciousness had already discovered the figure of Jing Hu swimming over from a distance. Jing Hu didn't hide his figure. Everyone sensed it, but no one answered Yang Chen. Jing Hu's speed was very fast. In just a moment, he had reached everyone's side. Seeing Yang Chen, the small eyes on his round face glared, and he immediately asked angrily, "What were you doing just now?" Junior had a slight understanding. "I hope Senior Jing is magnanimous enough to forgive me." Yang Chen's attitude did not change because of his breakthrough. The other party was a heavenly immortal expert, a terrifying expert who could kill them at any time. Jing Hu circled around Yang Chen twice. His spiritual consciousness also scanned Yang Chen a few times. Yang Chen just smiled and let Jing Hu do what he wanted, without showing any impatience. There seems to be a change, I can't tell. Jing, who dropped this sentence, then immediately turned to Gao Yu and asked, Do you still have that pill? It's a very interesting pill. That's the 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill that my husband personally refined. If you want, my husband should have more. At this time, how could Gao Yu not know how to make Yang Chen take the initiative to explain the origin of the pill? There are still some questioning inner heart pills. If Senior needs them, just ask. Yang Chen did not hesitate to take out a jade bottle. There were at least 10 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pills inside. He handed it to Jing, whose fat hands without any hesitation and casually suggested, It's best to take one every 100 years. That way the effect will be the best. You're a straightforward person, I like it. Jing, who liked Yang Chen's straightforward attitude. He immediately put away the jade bottle and patted Yang Chen's shoulder. His eyes then turned to Gong Sunling and said, Do you want some more delicious food? Of course, this request would not be refused. Everyone sat together again and began eating and drinking. While eating and drinking, Jing, who finally asked about the purpose of Yang Chen and the others. You've been here for quite some time now. What are your plans? After discovering the underwater mansion, we came in to have a look. Then we found you, Senior. Yang Chen answered skillfully. Is there only Senior in this underwater mansion? Why haven't I seen anyone else? I'm the only one here. Of course, you can't see anyone else. Jing, who replied with food in his mouth while he was eating. He didn't mean to hide anything at all. This is all mine. No one can touch it. Yang Chen made an O sound, picked up the wine glass and touched Jing, whose glass. After drinking the Jade Dragon wine, Yang Chen asked intentionally or unintentionally, Senior, do you spend all your heaven's tribulations here? Of course. Jing, who took a big mouthful of food and said vaguely, I haven't gone out. Of course I spend it here. Senior, I'm a little curious. There is no thunder tribulation, fire tribulation and wind tribulation outside. How did Senior survive these 3 disasters? Yang Chen's words became more and more casual. Listening to Yang Chen's question, everyone understood. No wonder Yang Chen said that this was the secret of the parting hatred sea. It turned out that there was such an amazing secret hidden here. There were no 3 disasters in the spiritual world. There were only human immortal tribulations for the peak of human immortal, earthly immortal tribulations for the peak of earthly immortal, and celestial immortal tribulations for celestial immortals. There were also 3 tribulations, but the difficulty was many times higher than in the mortal world. Moreover, each tribulation had 99 tribulations, which were called 100 tribulations. Every time they changed to another world, the tribulations would be greatly increased. The immortal world was even more terrifying. Both Xian immortal tribulations and golden immortal tribulations had 999 tribulations, which were called 1,000 tribulations. As for the zenith heaven golden immortal, there were 9,999 tribulations. If he really survived, he would become a real innumerable tribulation true immortal. The immortal world didn't have the tribulations of the spiritual world, and the spiritual world didn't have the tribulations of the mortal world. This also led to the fact that although the natives of the spiritual world were born with very strong cultivation, they could never become real human immortals without experiencing the real 3 disasters and tribulations. At this point, the natives of the spiritual world were not as good as Mu Mingyuan, Yang Lan, and Yang Lan, who were masters who ascended with their strong cultivation base. At least they still had hope to improve, but the natives didn't even have a chance to improve. Jing, who had always been alone. Obviously, he was the natives of the spiritual world. So how did he become an expert of the 8th grade of Fairy Immortal? There was obviously a great secret in it. Chapter 1561. Oh, there's a big house in this underwater mansion that can trigger the calamity you mentioned. Jing, who was relatively naive. He directly revealed the secret that everyone wanted to know. Senior, this is related to the safety of the entire underwater mansion. Don't say this to anyone in the future. At this moment, after getting all the words out, Yang Chen began to seriously remind Jing Hu, if other people know, Senior's safety will be in danger. Listening to Yang Chen's words, Jing Hu's gaze became a little strange. After looking at Yang Chen for a long time with an inexplicable look, Jing Hu smiled and nodded. You're a good person, your words are also very pleasant to hear, very good. Very good. As he spoke, Jing Hu nodded and said a few words of very good. In the end he looked solemn and said very seriously, if you don't say anything, I plan to keep you all here to accompany me and never go out again. Jing Hu's character was simple, but this didn't mean he was stupid. None of the Heaven Immortal experts were simple, especially after swallowing a 5 revolutions questioning inner heart pill from Yang Chen. Even if he couldn't think of it for a while, a few months' time was enough for him to think clearly about some things. The words just now were also expressed through Yang Chen's mouth to express the meaning of the test. Everyone was awestruck, secretly thinking that it was a close call. This time, if it wasn't for Yang Chen's timely response, maybe he could only stay here to accompany Jing Hu. An 8th grade Heaven Immortal expert wanting to keep a few human Immortal juniors was completely no problem, even if Yang Chen's yellow turban strongman body refining technique had been cultivated to the earth-penetrating strength realm. He still couldn't escape. You have a good mind, for the sake of these pills, in the future, you and your wife who can cook and, plus the one who can brew wine, if there's anything you need, come here to treat me to delicious food. I'll help you if I can. Jing Hu's face regained its smiling look. But, you promised someone to come and cook for me, you can't go back on your word. Don't worry, Senior. After this junior goes out, I will immediately find a suitable chef to send to Senior. How could Yang Chen not care about this kind of thing? He quickly agreed. Come, let's continue drinking. Everyone's main goal had been achieved, so they immediately forgot about all the danger they had just faced and began to drink again. Senior, if my husband brings a few suitable juniors here to undergo the tribulation, would you be able to help? Yang Chen didn't talk about this later, but Gao Yu was a smart woman. She immediately took the opportunity of serving the dishes and asked. Those calamities can only be triggered once every 3 years. In any case, they're just sitting there. It's not like they can't be used if someone needs them. Jing Hu seemed to have understood a lot of things with the help of the questioning inner heart pill during this time, and his speech was very organized. However, you have to promise me a few conditions. Senior, please speak. Yang Chen originally planned to talk about this topic after everyone had walked around a few more times. Since Gao Yu had already asked and Fatty Jing had also given an answer, Yang Chen could no longer remain silent and immediately took the initiative to take over the topic. First, I don't have a good cultivation method yet. The one you have is good. Can you teach it to me? Jing Hu pointed to Yang Chen, Ho Yun and Gao Yu and immediately put forward the first condition. The fairy immortal master was really knowledgeable. He had long discovered that Yang Chen, Ho Yun and Gao Yu had all cultivated the 10th water true secret art, so he was not polite at all. No problem. Yang Chen nodded without hesitation and immediately put it into action. A piece of jade slip that recorded the 10th water true secret art and a large bottle of 10th water true essence were directly handed to Jing Hu's hands. The conch underwater mansion was originally at the bottom of the sea and had a pure 10th water attribute. He believed that after Jing Hu cultivated the original cultivation method, his cultivation base would become more and more powerful. Maybe he could be promoted to the 9th grade of the fairy immortal realm in the near future. Second, only the 3 of you can come in with people. There can't be more people at a time. Jing Hu was not ambiguous and immediately gave Yang Chen, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling 3 jade plates in return. Believe me, after you go out, it will be difficult to find the underwater mansion again. These 3 jade plates can bring you in. Before it was agreed that it should be Yang Chen, Gong Sunling and Sun Qingxue who made the wine, but at this time Jing who seemed to have ignored this problem and gave the jade plate directly to Gao Yu. Of course, the three of them would not say it. Anyway, Yang Chern had distiller's yeast and could take it out at any time, so they did not have to worry about not having enough wine to drink. There is no problem with this. 3 disasters happened once every 3 years. At most, Yang Chern could only bring 3 people in at a time. There would not be many people. As for only the 3 of Yang Chern, there was no objection. This was the capital of the rise of Chunyang Palace in the future. Yang Chern would not agree to give it to others. Third, when the time is right, you have to bring me outside to broaden my horizons. Jing, who did not mean to be polite from the beginning to the end. He put forward one condition after another. A person who cultivated to the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm did not even have the ability to judge the enemy's cultivation base, simply because he had no horizons. If he wanted to go further in the future, he could only broaden his horizons and see more local customs. This situation was very similar to Ho Yun in the past. No problem at all. If Senior is willing, you can also be a loyal elder in my Chunyang Palace and use the disciples of Chunyang Palace at any time. While Yang Chen agreed, he did not forget to rope him in. When necessary, it is not a problem to arrange a worldly experience for Senior. The last one, if you want to refine any medicinal pills in the future, you have to give me a few to satisfy my craving. The last condition seemed to have appeared because of the questioning inner heart pill. Many cultivators wanted to ask Master Yang to refine medicinal pills but could not get it. Jing, who was not embarrassed at all when he put it forward. Deal, Senior, deal. Yang Chen agreed without hesitation. It was absolutely worth it to exchange a few medicinal pills for the rise of Chunyang Palace in the spiritual realm. What was the point of refining medicinal pills? Wasn't it in exchange for more benefits? Now what Yang Chen promised was an exchange. This time, everyone had reached a complete agreement, and the guests and the host were happy. Of course, the host here had no intention of entertaining guests at all. Even the wine and dishes were prepared by the guests, but the host ate happily. It was also a rare scenery on the road of cultivation. Jing, who ate and drank to his heart's content, and got drunk again. However, before he got drunk, he did not forget to send everyone out of the underwater mansion. The people who were drinking suddenly went from the bright underwater mansion to the dark Lihan seabed. Everyone was amused and inexplicable. This Jing, who did not seem to play cards according to common sense at all. He was really an eccentric person. Ho Yun began to search for the conch where the underwater mansion was located on the seabed, but Yang Chen smiled and stopped him. No need to look, old Ho, you can't find it. Chapter 1562. At the bottom of the hatred-parting sea, there were at least 800 million conches like this. It was impossible to find a conch with the underwater mansion hidden among so many conches. Yang Chen didn't say that it was a critical time to find the underwater mansion. Not to mention Ho Yun, even a peak sky immortal expert might not be able to find it. Ho Yun looked down and didn't seem to believe it. He had just come out of the underwater mansion and was standing here. Obviously, the underwater mansion was not far away. As long as he found all the conches within a radius of 5 kilometers, wouldn't he be able to find the underwater mansion easily? Except for Ho Yun, the others believed Yang Chen's words. Only Ho Yun didn't believe it. There was no other way. They could only sit there and slowly taste the wine while waiting for Ho Yun to search through all the conches within a radius of 5 kilometers. However, he still couldn't find the underwater mansion where Jing Hu was. This is strange. Ho Yun walked to the side of the crowd angrily. He grabbed the wine pot from the table and gulped it down. Then, he slammed it on the table and said unhappily, "You found the underwater mansion with a casual grab. That's because Senior Jing Hu didn't put any restrictions on it. I only had one chance." Yang Chen smiled and explained, "Now, even if you hold the underwater mansion in your hand, you can't be sure whether it's the underwater mansion or not. If you have the leisure time, you should look around and see if there are any spirit veins. Not being able to find the underwater mansion, everyone was a bit disappointed. However, when they thought that Yang Chun and Gao Yugong Sunling had the jade medallions and could come to the bottom of the sea to summon the underwater mansion at any time, they became excited. After so many years, everyone had been in Chunyang Palace and had a strong sense of belonging to the sect. An underwater mansion that could allow the indigenous people of the spirit realm to go through the tribulation might not be of much help to a big sect. However, for a sect like Chunyang Palace, which had no foundation, it was simply a heaven-sent opportunity for development. No wonder Yang Chun said that the sky immortal level spirit vein was not a secret of the hatred parting sea. Compared to the conch underwater mansion, that spirit vein was worthless. With this underwater mansion, Chunyang Palace can cultivate a human immortal native every 3 years after passing the tribulation. After 1,000 years, Chunyang Palace would have more than 300 disciples, not including those who had ascended. In any case, it could be regarded as a sect that could stand firm. Of course, such important news had to be reported to the sect as soon as possible. Everyone was no longer in the mood to leisurely swim at the bottom of the sea. They all requested to rush back to the sect. Along the way, no one asked Yang Chun how he knew that there was a heaven immortal level spirit vein at the bottom of the sea of parting hatred, much less how he randomly picked up a conch and found the one with the underwater mansion. After so many years, everyone was already used to the mysteriousness that Yang Chun displayed. This time they were really used to such a result with just 2 small attacks. After not seeing it for a year, the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace already had a little shape. The head of the palace and several elders have organized at least thousands of years of indigenous people of the spiritual world to join the sect. These indigenous people with at least the peak Yuanying stage were now building the mountain gate of Chunyang Palace from scratch according to the design of the head of the palace. If the cultivators of the mortal world knew that the masters of the peak Yuanying stage could only be used as construction workers, it was not known how many people would have their jaws broken. Seeing that Yang Chun and the others returned, the head of the palace and several elders were very happy. They came up and asked about their well-being. After taking care of them, they asked about the harvest of their trip. I found a spirit vein of heaven immortal level. Ho Yun's mouth was fast and he could not hide his words. When the head of the palace asked, he immediately blurted it out. Spirit vein of heaven immortal level? Without waiting for Ho Yun to say the following words, the head of the palace and Elder Meng Xian had already stood up excitedly, as if they couldn't believe it. They turned directly to Yang Chun and Gao Yu and confirmed with surprise, is it really a spirit vein of heaven immortal level? Among the disciples in front of them, only Yang Chun and Gao Yu and Gong Sunling were absolutely reliable. The words of others had to be discounted. Ho Yun had done this kind of thing before. Now he was finally suspected by the head of the palace, which made him lose face. Really? Yang Chun nodded with a smile. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling next to him did not speak, but when their husband spoke, they also nodded heavily. With the guarantee of Yang Chen's family of 3, the head of the palace seemed to have put down a big stone in his heart. The smile on his face could no longer be suppressed and immediately bloomed. Elder Meng Xian next to him was even more direct. He stood in the same place and began to laugh. Wang Yong, Elder Gao Shiyan and Elder Jing Feng, who were sitting, were also full of smiles. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts. With this spirit vein of heaven immortal level, the development of Chunyang Palace in the future would no longer have any shackles. It was not a dream to ascend to the top of the sect. When they thought that the originally unknown Chunyang Palace had grown into a big sect comparable to the super sect in the hands of several people present, everyone was extremely proud. Even if they ascended immediately and saw the ancestors of Chunyang Palace, they dared to raise their heads and say to the ancestors that the disciples were not ashamed. Such a great achievement in the history of Chunyang Palace, it was estimated that no one could match it except the ancestors. It was not an exaggeration to say that there was no one in the history of the Chunyang Palace who had deceived the ancestors. In addition to cultivation, what were the cultivators looking for? Wasn't it just this sense of achievement of bringing glory to the ancestors? The people present could be said to have fully achieved this, and with this spirit vein of heaven immortal level, they could do better in the future. Good, good, good. The head of the palace didn't know what to use to describe it, but a series of good words revealed his mood at the moment. Several elders looked at the face of Yang Chen, and they kept nodding in their hearts. Accepting this disciple was absolutely the right choice. Although no one said it, everyone knew that the spirit vein of heaven immortal level must have been discovered by Yang Chen, and no one would ever doubt this. Yang Chen insisted on taking a few troublesome guys out for a stroll, and several core executives were looking forward to the surprise of their return. Sure enough, as soon as they came back, it was such a surprise. Yang Chen had never let them down. The spirit vein is nothing. Ho Yun was left alone for a while, and his heart was a bit sour. After seeing that everyone had accepted the surprise, he said slowly later, "We found something better." It was rare for Ho Yun to be willing to perform like this. Yang Chen's family and the old tree demon did not steal Ho Yun's limelight, and let him slowly sell the suspense. The spirit vein of heaven immortal level is nothing? Several core executives trembled in their hearts, and they suppressed the excitement in their hearts. Elder Wang Yong asked in a deep voice, "What good things did you find?" Chapter 1563. In fact, it's nothing, I just found an aqua mansion. Ho Yun saw that everyone's attention was focused on himself, and he was even more proud, and said slowly in a calm tone, "Aqua mansion?" Hearing Ho Yun's show off, the head of the palace and Elder Meng Xian, who had just sat down, stood up again. Standing with them were Elder Gao and Elder Zheng. The only one who could sit was Wang Yong. "What kind of aqua mansion? How big is it? What's inside?" This was the question that everyone was concerned about, and Elder Jing Feng asked before the head of the palace. No one knew better than the top executives of the Chunyang Palace what a good immortal's cave meant. The Chunyang Palace in the mortal world had a blue vault mountain immortal's cave. The entire sect had the last reliance and capital. They were no longer afraid of being bound by the narrow territory of Meiqing Mountain, and the vigorous development of the sect. Although there was the expansion of the demon continent in the later period, the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave had always been regarded as the top secret of the Chunyang Palace. Only the most loyal disciples had the opportunity to enter the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave to cultivate after going through many tests. It not only had a complete cultivation environment, but also left a large number of cultivation classics. After Yang Chen's sorting, almost half of them had become the collection of the Chunyang Palace. In the forbearance stage, at least 80% of the masters of the Chunyang Palace were hidden in the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave. Unfortunately, the most suitable place for the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave was still in the mortal world. Before the head of the palace ascended, he handed over the Immortal's Cave to the current palace master, Shangguan Feng. Now that they heard that there was the same Immortal's Cave in the spiritual world, even if it was a pure aqua mansion, it was also a hidden card, and everyone could not help but be surprised. At this moment, what everyone was most concerned about was the level of this aqua mansion, how big it was, and what kind of help it could bring to the sect. It's just that Ho Yun's mouth was cheap, and he was slowly selling it over there, which made people gnash their teeth. Seeing that the faces of several elders were not right, Ho Yun coughed softly and continued the topic just now. It was to answer Elder Zheng's question, how big it is, we don't know, and what is in it is not very clear. Then what did you discover? When they heard Ho Yun say that he didn't know anything, the elders were so angry that they almost cursed him. You don't know anything, and you're keeping us in suspense. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew he couldn't beat Ho Yun, the irascible Elder Meng Xian would have already pounced on Ho Yun to teach him a lesson. We found an 8th-tier heaven immortal expert. Before Elder Meng Xian could flare up, Ho Yun's next words gave everyone a fright. What kind of concept was an 8th-stage heavenly immortal expert? In the territory of Equal Gate sect, everyone had seen heaven immortal experts. Those heaven immortal experts came with good intentions, but even so, the aura that they inadvertently leaked could make everyone keep quiet out of fear. It could be said that a heaven immortal expert didn't need to be at the 8th stage. As long as he was a 1st-stage heaven immortal, if he really made a move now, even if Chunyang Palace had Long Xian on their hands, they would still end up being annihilated. You didn't offend that expert, did you? Elder Gao asked cautiously. What he was most afraid of hearing was that Ho Yun had a bad temper and offended others. Offended? No, not at all. Ho Yun answered quickly this time, shaking his head directly like a rattled drum. Just when everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief, Ho Yun added very casually, "When we came up, the 3 of us surrounded him and beat him violently. Old Ho, smashed him at least a few dozen times. I didn't offend anyone." Poof, Ancestor Wang Yong, who had been sitting on the fishing platform, just drank a mouthful of tea. When he heard Ho Yun's words, he couldn't help but spit it out. Elder Zheng was even more shocked and sat back in his seat. As for the palace master and Elder Meng and Elder Zheng, they had been stunned by Ho Yun's words and could not speak for a long time. Didn't offend anyone? He came up and beat him violently, smashed him dozens of times. This was called not offending anyone? Then what was offending people? Could it be that only killing the whole family, digging the grave and whipping the corpse was considered offending? Ho Yun wanted this effect. It was rare for a few core executives to be fooled by him. Seeing the performance of everyone, Ho Yun laughed forward and backward and could not stop. AI. Looking at Ho Yun's laughter, how could everyone not know that they were fooled by Ho Yun? The palace master shook his head and sighed for a while. There was such a playful guy in his sect who had a headache. Elder Meng directly ignored Ho Yun and turned to Yang Chen and Gao Yugong's Sunling. There was a reliable disciple who didn't ask, but he asked the guy who didn't match. Everyone deserved to be fooled. What the hell is going on? Elder Meng asked aloud. Of course, the target of his question was Yang Chen's family. Even the old tree demon next to him was more realistic than Ho Yun. What old Ho said is right, it is true that he came up and beat him violently. Yang Chen replied with a smile. However, old Ho smashed him dozens of times, nothing happened to him, but old Ho was sent flying by him. What the hell is going on? The palace master also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ho Yun, this guy was not bragging. He just left half a sentence without saying it. At this moment, everyone's interest was aroused, and naturally they urged Yang Chen to give a detailed account. Hearing that the master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm didn't know his own strength at first, and ran away when he saw people, everyone sighed. Later, Yang Chen captured a master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm with a table of wine and dishes. The ups and downs of the plot, the huge contrast before and after made several elders in the sect surprised. When they heard that Yang Chen actually completely suppressed a master of the 8th grade of the fairy immortal realm in terms of strength, everyone's eyes swept around Yang Chen. It seemed that Yang Chen's cultivation had not changed much, but they didn't know how effective Yang Chen's breakthrough was. Of course, the most important news was always the last to come out. When they heard that there were 3 disasters in the underwater mansion, even if it was only once in 3 years, even the calmest ancestor Wang Yong, who had been sitting still, could not sit still and stood up to ask about the specific things. The 3 of you made an agreement with Senior Jing Hu to allow you to take people in to cross the tribulation? This news was so incredible that after everyone heard it, their first reaction was not joy, but extreme suspicion. After getting affirmative answers from Yang Chen and everyone's mouths, and after seeing the 3 jade cards, several core executives sat back in their original seats in shock. They all fell into contemplation and no longer had the mood to talk. With this underwater mansion, why can't my Chunyang Palace prosper? The palace master finally patted the armrest of the chair and stood up, laughing. Chapter 1564. After experiencing the ups and downs of their mood, falling from the clouds to hell and then flying back to the clouds, several core executives of Chunyang Palace finally fully understood what happened, and at the same time, they also understood what kind of opportunity Chunyang Palace was facing. They didn't dare to say anything else in the spiritual world, but the natives were at least hundreds of billions. Not to mention far away, just the Sunset Rock plus Linyang River, there were hundreds of millions. The fact that the head of the palace could find thousands of natives above the peak yuanying stage in just a few months had already explained everything. So many disciples with good qualifications, just because they had not experienced the tribulation, they could not become real human immortals. How big of a loss was this for a sect? Now with this underwater mansion, Chunyang Palace could carefully select suitable people from the natives to cross the tribulation in the future, and develop and strengthen the strength of the sect. Several core executives who wanted to make the sect prosperous were so happy that they were about to explode. This secret must not be leaked. For how to use this favorable condition to strengthen the sect, the head of the palace and several elders were 1,000 times more experienced than Yang Chen in specific affairs, and they immediately told everyone to keep it confidential. As for the following things, Yang Chen didn't have to worry about it anymore, as long as the time came to take people to cross the tribulation. Of course, everyone understood the importance of confidentiality, and they knew what to do without the instructions of the head of the palace. Next, it was natural for the head of the palace to select suitable people to join the Chunyang Palace, and Yang Chen didn't have to worry much. This time, the main purpose of coming back was to tell the head of the palace about these two news. Now that the purpose has been achieved, Yang Chen and the others could not help in the sect, so they left together. However, Yang Chen had no intention of finding out any more secrets. He just had to wait for the arrival of Tao Junkie on the sea. In this regard, Ho Yun and the others were certainly not so willing, so Ho Yun, the old tree demon, Shi Kuei and Xie Sha, the four monster race masters, were separated from Yang Chen's family in the sect. Several of them had to go to the Sunset Rock and Linyang River together to see what good things they could find. Yang Chen really didn't plan to make any big movements in the near future. Whether it was the spiritual vein or the underwater mansion, it was because these two things could be of great use to the sect, and they could let the disciples of the sect have enough confidence in the most timely manner. For the current Pure Yang Palace, these two things were enough. At present, Chunyang Palace was still a small sect. Excluding Long Xian, it only had a few human immortals. It was very tender. At present, the fact that it could get its hands on the Sunset Cliff, the river of overlooking sun and the sea of parting hatred to establish a sect was already its limit. If even greater benefits were to appear, others would surely set their eyes on it and devour it whole. For the time being, Yang Chen finally had a little leisure time. Now was not the time to go out, so the most correct way to improve his cultivation was to stay in the sect or on the sea of parting hatred to recuperate and improve his cultivation. The Dragon Palace was more suitable for the Immortal's cave in the water than any other underwater mansion. During the time of waiting for Tao Junkie, the Yang family of three transformed the Dragon Palace into a simple sea palace with only a few small rooms on the Lihan Sea. All day long, they were either fishing or watching the scenery, or they were with their two wives under the moonlight, drinking wine and eating delicacies. This kid had a comfortable life. As early as when they were in the mortal world, Yang Chen and Tao Junkie had made an agreement that Tao Junkie would definitely pay attention to the news of Yang Chen's ascension, and then when Yang Chen settled down, she would rush over to meet him. Previously, Chunyang Palace destroyed the Chiman sect and released the prolonging life pill. He believed that Tao Junkie would soon know such a big event. Naturally, Chunyang Palace's new territory was also known to the world, and Tao Junki knew where to find Yang Chen. Fairy Junki was born in the mortal world of Taishanmen, the profound heaven sect in the spiritual world. Now the relationship between the profound heaven sect and other sect was tense. Fairy Junki could not meet Yang Chen in Chunyang Palace, so she could only be at sea. During the time of waiting for Tao Junki, Yang Chen also did another thing. When Yang Chen was chased by Luo Yuan, a master of the Deshang stage, the octopus, Lan Ning, who helped Yang Chen kill Luo Yuan, had already ascended for thousands of years. He didn't know how she was doing now. At that time, Lan Ning left a monster power crystal, and Yang Chen activated it on his own residence in the Sea of Parting Hatred. He believed that if Lan Ning was not dead, she would definitely be able to feel his monster power. Yang Chen and Lan Ning had only met once. Everyone helped each other. Yang Chen didn't know if this would lead to Lan Ning. However, if Lan Ning gave him face and came, Yang Chen didn't mind taking care of Lan Ning. After all, several things in the mortal world were also thanks to Lan Ning. It was always Yang Chen's habit to repay kindness. Wu Xiong, Elder Wu and Yang Chen were close friends. When Elder Wu ascended, Yang Chen also instructed Elder Wu to collect 1 or 2 Immortal's caves after coming to the spiritual world. Elder Wu was a rogue cultivator. If there was no sect to rely on in the spiritual world, it would be difficult. Yang Chen didn't know if Elder Wu would take the initiative to visit after hearing the recent reputation of Chunyang Palace and Yang Chen. Lady Fanghua had already ascended, and now she must be in Yin Yang Demon School. Yang Chen's other wives and concubines had just arrived at the spiritual world sect not long ago. They were the disciples of the lowest generation. In the past, no matter how talented they were in the mortal world, they could only obediently listen to the arrangement of the sect. It was estimated that they would not have a chance to meet in a short time. They could only wait for them to cultivate in the sect for a period of time, and then reunite. Even if Yang Chen had 10,000 years of memory from his previous life, he still couldn't know what would happen to these people who had changed their life trajectories by Yang Chen. He could only passively wait for the news. This was also something that couldn't be helped. The years of cultivation were not fighting and killing all day long. Peaceful cultivation was the real key. Yang Chen was very glad that he had so many confidants to accompany him in this life. Or now it could not be said that they were confidants, but family members. This life wasn't as lonely as it was in his previous life, and it wasn't like his previous life where he had to hide from place to place all day long. In his previous life, Yang Chen, Yang Lan, and the Taishanmen were mortal enemies. Now that the mortal world's hatred had been avenged, Yang Lan probably would not feel good. Now Yang Chen should slowly plan how to deal with the Xiantian sect in the spiritual world. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling really enjoyed the feeling of only the two of them being with their husband. Without others to disturb them, it was calm and peaceful. If it weren't for the shadow of the Xiantian sect in their hearts, they really wanted to live a simple life like this. Unfortunately, the spiritual world was not a blessed land that stood aloof from worldly affairs. The peaceful life of the three was quickly broken. Just after Yang Chen waited for more than a year, a powerful divine sense quickly enveloped the three of them and unscrupulously explored the place where the three of them were. "Who has my demon power crystal?" After a while, an unusually charming voice sounded in the ears of the three of them, and at the same time, a huge black shadow appeared under the sea. Chapter 1565. Senior Lan, this junior is here. Hearing this voice, Yang Chen immediately stood up and took out the demon power crystal left by Lan Ning from the Qiankuan bag, held it in his hand and said loudly to the sea, "It's you, little doll." Hearing Yang Chen's words and seeing the demon power crystal in Yang Chen's hand, the huge black shadow underwater quickly became smaller, instantly turned into a blue light, and came not far in front of Yang Chen. A water-blue gauze wrapped in a graceful and unusual figure, standing opposite the three people with a smile, who was not Lan Ning. However, He didn't know why. Yang Chen always felt that Lan Ying seemed to be a little tired. After not seeing each other for 1,000 years, Lan Ying's appearance didn't seem to have changed at all. She still looked the same as when she cultivated the transformation secret art. However, her cultivation base was very different. Now, Lan Ying at least had the cultivation base of the Earth Immortal Grade 3. Even in the spiritual world, she was not a soft persimmon that anyone dared to bully. Senior Lan is still elegant, congratulations. Yang Chen smiled and cupped his hands at Lan Ying, and at the same time did not forget to introduce the two women beside him. Senior, these two are my wives, the kindness of saving my life that day. This junior will always remember it in my heart, thank you senior. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling followed behind Yang Chen, and they were also very respectful and thanked her, thank you senior. This was the savior of their husband, how could they be courteous? It's good that you are here, you can fight the enemy with me. The etiquette of the two women, Lan Ying just waved her hand as a greeting, and said without any politeness, there is a guy who has a helper, and fought with me a few days ago. I am a little weak, and I am at a disadvantage. With your help, I can kill them. As soon as she came up, she asked Yang Chen to help fight. Yang Chen didn't know whether to say that he was lucky or not, but since Lan Ying said so, Yang Chen also had to help. Senior, wait a minute, it's not too late to take a rest first. No wonder Lan Ying looked tired, it turned out to be an opponent. As Yang Chen spoke, he reached out and handed over a 5 revolutions essence cultivating pill. 5th revolution pill? Good stuff. Lan Ying was also a knowledgeable person. At a glance, she saw that the medicinal pill was extraordinary. She reached out and took it. She did not guard against it and threw it into her mouth. 5 revolving essence culturing pill could restore vitality and replenish spiritual power. After a while, Lan Ying absorbed the potency of the pill, and her expression and momentum were restored. The feeling of being in high spirits was no longer faintly tired. Who is the opponent? What's his cultivation? Within the scope of Yang Chen's spiritual awareness, apart from Long Xian, there was no enemy who could become the opponent of Lan Ying. The other party must be far away, and there was plenty of time. Yang Chen did not mind asking clearly. It's a woman. Her cultivation level is only at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage, but the magic treasures on her are truly powerful. When Lan Ying spoke, she still had an unconvinced posture. Especially the fire seed on her body is very powerful, I can't do anything to her for a while. An opponent at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage shouldn't be able to do anything to senior, right? Yang Chen was startled. The difference between the two sides seemed to be a bit too much. Lan Ying was not the kind of expert who came from the orthodox cultivation of a famous sect. Her cultivation of the 3rd stage of the Earth Immortal stage was estimated to be the result of fighting. It was a bit strange that she was forced like this by an opponent at the 5th stage of the human immortal stage. If it's just her alone, she can't do anything to me, Lan Ying said hatefully. But she has a group of helpers, 12 wooden puppets. Their cultivation level is not very high, but they are very powerful when they cooperate with each other. It's just a draw. Just knowing that you are here, I pulled you as a helper. As long as you can hold 1 or 2 of them, I can end them. 12 wooden puppets? The fire seed on the woman's body was also very powerful. Listening to Lan Ying's description, the more Yang Chen thought about it, the more he felt that the opponent in Lan Ying's mouth should be Tao Junkie. Her natal true fire was pure Yin true fire, and the 12 wooden puppets were of course 12 Penglai divine wood demons. With Tao Junkie's strength, after ascending for hundreds of years, she was almost in the realm of the 5th stage of the human immortal stage. Yang Chen had to ask clearly, otherwise if the flood rushed into the Dragon King Temple, it would be a tragedy. Her magic weapon is very powerful. What kind of magic weapon is it? Yang Chen asked. A courtyard, can't move. Of course, Lan Ying would not hide it. She also thought that Yang Chen would help her, so she naturally had to introduce it clearly. Courtyard? The first thing that came to Yang Chen's mind was his own manner. The demon seal array on the periphery had the same protective ability even in the spiritual world. It was normal for Lan Ying of the Earth Immortal stage to be unable to move it. This time, Yang Chen and Gao Yugong's Sunling were more and more sure that Lan Ying's opponent was Tao Junkie. Is it a manner? Yang Chen asked with a smile. Does she have a very fast iron-winged eagle? There's such a dead bird. Lan Ying seemed to have suffered a loss. When she answered, she extremely belittled her opponent, and the iron-winged eagle also became a dead bird. Fortunately, the dead bird is only fast in the air. It is not my opponent under the water. After saying so much, Lan Ying finally realized something and asked strangely, You haven't seen it, how do you know this? Senior, if this younger generation junior didn't guess wrong, Senior's opponent should be a concubine of this younger generation junior. Yang Chen replied with a wry smile. I don't know how she offended Senior, but I ask Senior to look at this younger generation junior's face and forgive her this time. When she arrives, this younger generation junior will let her apologize to Senior. With these words, Yang Chen put his own position very low. After all, it was his own savior. Since he knew that it was Tao Junkie, naturally he could not let them fight again. Tao Junkie would not disobey Yang Chen's meaning. Now that Yang Chen said some good words, it could also dispel Lan Ying's anger. Your concubine? Lan Ying looked at Gao Yu and Gong's Sunling behind Yang Chen, and her eyes returned to Yang Chen. She is very beautiful. If she is really your concubine, you have a good luck with women. After a word of praise, she immediately waved her hand. Since she is your concubine, I won't pursue it. I met her on the road and wanted to send a ticket to her. I didn't expect it to be so difficult. Knowing that this was the case, Lan Ying looked like a beautiful woman on the outside, but she was a robber in the sea who bullied the weak. When she encountered a cultivator whose cultivation base was not as good as her own, it was very normal to be tempted. It was a pity that she met Tao Junkie, who was armed by Yang Chen. The master of the 3rd grade of the Earth Immortal and the 5th grade of the Human Immortal fought to a draw, and failed to succeed. During the conversation, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness had already found the figure of Tao Junkie. Tao Junkie was now in the Yang family manor, urging the manor to rush in this direction. Her face was full of vigilance, and the 12 Penglai divine wood monsters around her were also careful, and they looked a little nervous. Junkie, come here. Yang Chen directly sent out a shock with his spiritual awareness and passed the message to Tao Junkie.